A wee bit early, folks, but good evening, WNBA and women's basketball fans, and welcome in to another mega show. This is the WNBA 365 Network's second half WNBA season preview show, bringing together the brightest minds in women's basketball media together here on the WNBA 365 Network. Joined tonight, folks, by right now a four-man contingent, but to be joined, though, by many other great guests coming up, though, throughout the course of our program. Joining the Hangout, folks, by the man from Women's Basketball Daily, Steve Rice, Pat Friday, and, of course, Crystal Thomas and Eric Nemchok joining us today. Everybody, good to see you so far tonight. How's it going? And I know we're all excited to get the second half of the season underway, but on that, how's it going tonight? Good to see you all.
Hey, hey.
Doing well.
How we doing, folks?
And, of course, guys, like I'll say right now, later on, of course, guys, thank you so much again for being so gracious to take time out of your Thursday nights to join us here tonight. I know that we, of course, pulled some teeth and pulled some strings to get a pretty early start time so we can, of course, accommodate a lot of our friends that are joining us here tonight from the Midwest or from the East Coast. Of course, folks, Facebook, Twitter, live chat box, always open for you folks, so hit us up over on Facebook at facebook.com/WNBA365 or hit us up on Twitter at WNBA365 at CalamaC3 for myself. Crystal's at Pup1010. Eric is at Nemchocky, or follow Steve on Twitter. His handle, of course, is at WBB Daily. And also, Pat's handle is at the Flyest Hoopa, Hoopa. And now joining the Hangout, folks, by Steven Anderson from Project Spurs and San Antonio Stars Hoops.net. Steven, good to see you. I know that you're coming off surgery, but glad that you're back to 100%. How's it going tonight, buddy? Good to see you.
Thanks, guys. I'm doing great. Just working hard as always. And, get ready for the second half of the WNBA season.
A lot to do here, folks. Of course, you guys can also follow our man, Steven Anderson, on Twitter. His handle is at I am Steven Anderson on Twitter as well. And also follow the Project Spurs Network, too, on Twitter as well. And also follow Stars Hoops on Twitter as well, at SA Stars Hoops as well. Guys, of course, a very amazing beginning, I'd probably say, to the first half of the WNBA season. We do get underway on tonight's program. Of course, again, I'll say it again one more time, but again, thank you guys again very much for taking the time out of your Thursdays to join us. I know that we've worked around a lot of schedules, we've worked around a lot of things, but again, grateful to have all of you guys aboard here tonight. Again, folks, more guests will be joining in on tonight's program. I guess, guys, we kind of began to dissect the first half of the WNBA season. Again, a lot of record-shattering, a lot of great things for the historic 20th season of WNBA hoops getting underway. Steve, we'll start with you, kind of going left, right across the perimeter here. Steve, as you kind of think about it, what is like your overall thoughts, I guess, on how the first half of the WNBA season went? So many, great storylines, record starts of the season. But I guess, Mr. Rice, what do you think, though? What's your overall thoughts and your final observations, though, of how this first half of the WNBA season really was, a very good, positive step in the right direction for this 20th anniversary season?
Yeah, there's so many good things. I wouldn't want to drone on about all of them, but the pretty positive numbers as far as media numbers, game viewing numbers, in-arena attendance, again, some ups and downs, but overall it's been a pretty solid season. The marketing for the 20th anniversary aspect has been decent, I would say. They announced a new initiative this week with a contest and whatnot, but overall, things are starting to shake out standings wise. I'm really interested to see how this one and done play-in round works out. I'm not sure if that's going to be a good thing or not, but we shall see. But overall, just some phenomenal performances. NECA, of course, has just been on fire. It'll be interesting to see how this Olympic break does in terms of players getting rusty. But they're professional athletes. I don't see anyone getting rusty per se, but it gives some of these younger teams, Atlanta maybe, and definitely Connecticut, some more time together, with especially Connecticut bringing in Courtney Williams, and that's a team that looks like they're starting to gel. Your LA Sparks, obviously, sitting at the top, near the top of the heap. They've had plenty of rest, and I tell you, my ideal finals matchup would be an LA Minnesota matchup, and I can't wait to see something like that. That was the whole point of the new playoff format, is to have the cream of the crop, so to speak, in the finals. So we shall see.
We shall see, indeed. And again, Stephen, I know with the Stars somewhat unofficially celebrating their 20th season, of course, the franchise founded in Salt Lake City under the Jazz ownership group, moving to San Antonio a few years later. But I guess, Stephen, from what you've seen, though, at AT&T Center, I guess what has been, your overall thoughts on the whole picture of what has been a phenomenal first half of the season for the WNBA's 20th season in your mind, buddy?
Well, I mean, other than the Stars, who haven't had the best season up to this point, but I mean, overall, the league has done well. I mean, I like seeing how we've seen LA, who's in the past have not done very well in the recent seasons. They're up there. We all know Minnesota's up there every season, so that's not really much of a surprise. Well, believe it or not, I'm actually liking Breanna Stewart with Seattle. She's done very, very well. I mean, I think we all kind of expected that. Her, coming as a rookie, we're all of us here in San Antonio were hoping that she would get that top spot here in San Antonio, but unfortunately she's in Seattle, and she's playing very, very well. I like Mariah Jefferson, even though here in San Antonio she's got a little bit of some slack, being the number 2 pick. Everyone thought because she's with Connecticut, she was going to be an instant change maker for the Stars, but that rookie growing pains, I guess you can say, she hasn't had that success that people were expecting. But I do believe in years to come she will be very successful. But as for this season, I like Minnesota as always. I like LA. With the new format for the playoffs, I want to see those two in the WNBA finals. That would be a great finals to watch.
That would be simply incredible. That'd be an amazing 5-game series. And Pat, again, there's been a lot of pageantry, of course. We have what we've seen, of course, records being shattered for, this best start through X amount of games. Pat, I guess in your mind, what's been your thoughts on the big picture so far for this, very intriguing first half of the WNBA season in your mind?
Well, I definitely want to start by saying that I've just been really happy with a lot of things about the WNBA this season, and one of the biggest things that has been a source of pride for me has been just the level and the caliber of play this season. I mean, when you look at teams like San Antonio and Connecticut that are at the bottom of the league per se, they're in competitive games every night. The talent across the league, you can legitimately make an argument that these are some of the best talented, the most talented players in the world. And I've been just really happy with the product overall, and it puts us in a position to where now as fans and as advocates of the WNBA, we can really put the onus on, Lisa Borders and, the decision makers of the WNBA to look at expansion, because I've always maintained that there's been so much talent that's kind of forced out of the league with the WNBA, and it's kind of been a detriment to the quality of basketball in the league, because when you look at players in situations like Deanna Nolan, it was more lucrative for her to make the decision to not play in the WNBA. So to be in a position in the 20th season to be able to take those steps forward has been really impressive. But another thing for me has been really just keeping things in perspective and reminding people of where we are. There's a lot of criticism around the WNBA in terms of where we should be in year 20, but I challenge people to go back and look at where the where the NBA was in year 20. The WNBA is actually at a much better pace and a much higher pace of productivity than the NBA. This is a product that is developing. At the end of the day, we're still fighting for equality for women in this country in terms of the rate of pay, much less in sports and professional sports. So, to see where we are in terms of the caliber of play and the quality of basketball, I'm very happy with the first half of the season. I'm really excited to see where we go from the Olympics.
Crystal, I think Pat's onto something in regards again of how we've seen, of how the game has really changed and really evolved, as we kind of talked about too earlier in the offseason about how much the league has evolved and grown with style of play and the talent coming in now from what we've seen recently. But Crystal, I guess, what is the big picture in your mind of how the 20th season has gone so far for the WNBA through, again, the first half of the season?
I'll have to agree with Pat. I mean, just the can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yes, you're good.
Just the competition level. I mean, now since they took out the, conference thing as far as the playoffs. It just seems like everybody wants it more. Everybody's playing harder. Everybody's more focused. I don't think I've ever seen a WNBA season this competitive in a while. Not saying that the other seasons were competitive, but you could just tell the difference. Like, these teams have fires under them. It's pretty exciting to watch. I mean, I just love how the games have been. There's been heartbreakers. There's been buzzer beaters. There's all of that. I mean, there's just been so much excitement so far in the season, and I would say so far it's lived up to its far because it's the 20th anniversary. It's lived up to its name because of those competitive games.
Eric, Eric, in regards to, again, of how we had the changing of the guard of the new president over the offseason, of course, with Lisa Borders taking over, so far the WNBA has either met or maybe even exceeded expectations set for the season, again, with, of course, the 20th season, with all the marketing and stuff that's gone on, from the new advertising campaigns to the new contest, of course, put up this week. But again, Eric, like Crystal said, though, I mean, we had so many things, either record-shattering or, great comeback victories by teams, or buzzer beaters, or wins in, late in triple overtime for heaven's sakes. I guess, Eric, what in your mind, though, is the big picture about how the first half of the season has gone so far for the WNBA in their historic 20th season?
Yeah, no, I think Pat made a lot of great points, especially just the overall development of the league itself. I became a Sky season ticket holder in 2012, and I think every season since then, the draft has just infused more and more talent in the league. We're not seeing as many of these journeyman players just kind of bounced around, but teams are actually, keeping their draft picks. A lot more athleticism, a lot more skill league-wide, and that has led to more competition. You wouldn't have expected it from the records because, you got the Sparks and the Lynx both over 20 wins already, but that's what happens when you have a 12-team league. You got two teams basically hogging all the wins. So I think there's been a lot more parity than on the surface, it seems. And, yeah, it's just been there's recently an article posted on WNBA.com about there being much higher offensive efficiency this year. I think the shot clock resetting to only 14 seconds after the offensive rebound, I think that's big. I think that was a great decision by the league to help kind of facilitate the pace of the game a little bit more, kind of get teams playing more up-tempo, increasing offensive efficiency and what have you. And just the overall talent of the league again. I think it's continuing to grow. And as Pat said, I think the league is in a great spot for its 20th season.
They are in a very good spot right now, folks, for their 20th campaign. A couple of comments from our man in the box, Todd Mintz, again, folks, so you will be able to read some game recaps from on the network website starting on Sunday. It was going to be tomorrow, but, of course, Todd will be doing it on Sunday as of now. He said it'll be interesting to see if Nador and Dovovich who's playing the Olympics, will elevate playing time and overall play for these next 9 games. He says Nador does need to play. Well, guys, we'll kind of go around the perimeter, I guess, and throw some questions out to everybody, starting off with Steve Rice. Steve, in your mind, which team or player has been the biggest first-half surprise for the season in your mind, and why?
Boy, pick one, huh? Well, this is literally right off the top of my head. I'm going to go with Elizabeth Williams in Atlanta. I really like that trade when Atlanta pulled the trigger on that for the number 4 pick, but I am really impressed by her game in her sophomore season. There are lots of other ones, but first the one that sprang to mind was Elizabeth Williams. That's a big kid that you can build a franchise around. Obviously, they have Angel. Sancho is not completely out of gas. She's got some mileage on her, and it all comes down to their backcourt. But I'll go with Elizabeth Williams as my pick.
All right, so Stephen, Rice has got Elizabeth Williams for his first-half surprise on the player side, but Stephen, how about your player first-half surprise this season? Who do you think it is?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would have to say probably I have to agree and say Elizabeth Williams. I mean, she's been on a tear, and I mean she's done very, very well for Atlanta. I mean, and I on opening night here at the AT&T Center, I saw her play, and I mean, at first I was thinking, Atlanta could be the one. Maybe the Stars you knew coming in the Stars are not going to get many wins to start this season. I'm thinking, well, maybe Atlanta could be one of them. Unfortunately, they did lose in overtime. But, I mean, I like Elizabeth Williams. Her game is very, very good. I mean, I'm a little jealous she is in Atlanta, but, I mean, she's playing very, very well. And I like her presence just on that team has kind of changed things. I mean, you see Angel McCautry over there in Atlanta, but I mean, her Elizabeth Williams' presence on Atlanta has really changed that team, and I think going forward, it's going to make Atlanta very, very dangerous coming up.
2 votes for Elizabeth Williams. Pat, who do you think is your biggest first half surprise on the player home front, and why?
On the player side, I'm actually gonna flip it and go out west. And I want to make sure that this has a positive connotation because I'm a huge fan of this player. She's a pleasant surprise. I'm happy. This is what I expected. I'm glad that she's on this trajectory. Jewell Loyd. Being a Mercury fan, I kind of watched her take over a game this season that I wasn't too happy about. But the thing about it is, there's a killer instinct there. There's a tenacity that's there that I don't think was there at Notre Dame. There were times and big moments that I think Jewell kind of shrunk from the spotlight. And to see her, especially in this situation, because you still consider the Seattle team. I mean, they made some roster changes midseason because they realized that they were going to be in playoff contention and they didn't necessarily expect that. But you look at that team and the makeup of the team, you wouldn't necessarily think that Jewell would be the one that would be taking over for them right now. I mean, Sue Bird, you've seen why she's still the best point guard in the world in these Olympics. Brianna Stewart is far and away the best rookie in the league, and that would probably be the person that you think about first to be their go-to player. And then Crystal Langhorne has been an all-star in this league. So you look at that team and you kind of, question how Jewell would be the one to step up. But I think it's a testament to her work ethic. I think it's a testament to her drive. And I was really excited about her coming out in the draft the way that she did and coming out early because at the time I kind of predicted what was going to happen. I don't know if it factored into Jewell's thought process, but the reason that I thought that she came out, that it was a good idea because she would have the opportunity to play with Brianna Stewart, and it's been absolutely fun to watch.
It's been fun to watch. So, Crystal, 2 votes for Elizabeth Williams of Atlanta, 1 vote for Jewell Loyd from Seattle. Crystal, which player has been your biggest first half surprise and why?
Well, me and Pat actually think alike because I was going to say Jewell Loyd, but he stole it. So I really don't have another player to really talk about. He stole my player. That it was going to actually be Jewell Loyd. He pretty much said everything. So thank you, Pat.
Okay, so 2 votes for both Williams of Atlanta and Loyd of Seattle. But Erica, who do you think is your first half biggest surprise on the player home front and why?
Biggest surprise on the player development area would probably be Sugar Rogers for me. I think last season in New York, she was kind of they kind of had a carousel of 2s and 3s. They were rotating around with her and Tanisha Wright and Epiphany Prince and Essence Carson, what have you. But when Candace Wiggins retired, with Piff out with the ACL injury, although she's back now, Sugar Rogers has really stepped it up in a big way. She's not only kind of taken the brunt of that perimeter scoring load. Her minutes have been up a lot. I think she's playing over 30 minutes a game now. She's killing it from behind the perimeter. Like she's launching up a ton of 3s and she's making them. Like 44% with that many attempts is really, really good. When you consider what Tina Charles is doing for New York, like you need somebody, at least somebody on that team, to step it up from the perimeter. And Sugar Rogers has been more than acceptable for the New York Liberty. So I think if I had to pick for most improved player of the year, right now I think it has to be her.
Eric, I would agree about first half surprise for a player. I think Rogers is probably deserving of that. And actually, MIP was actually a question for later on, but Eric answered his question already. But I think, though, Eric, you're honest to me, though, in regards to, again, of how we have normally talked about not just Charles in the burnout stage, but also about, who's going to be that, player 2 behind her in the starting lineup or who's going to help her, get the, scoring drought or the scoring production kind of off her shoulders. And again, Rogers basically single-handedly, guys, beat Minnesota for their 3rd straight loss in overtime at Target Center earlier this season. Again, had a 30-point game when Tina was out with that broken nose. So I would agree with Eric that Rogers is my pick for player first half surprise. Guys, want to quickly just throw this out there real quick. We'll get a brief answer from everybody. A quick question from Tom Mintz. Steve Rice, starting with you. What do you think about Taylor Hill being a first half surprise in your mind? Yes or no?
Absolutely. I saw her play quite a bit at Ohio State. She and Tiana Hawkins both went the baby route, if you will, early in their career, like Candace Parker did, and it's taken them some time to get back and come back from that. But yeah, if I weren't going with Elizabeth Williams, Taylor Hill has definitely been a pleasant surprise and fulfilling potential, I guess you would call it. She's not, I wouldn't call her that franchise player that Washington badly needs.
No.
But she's definitely, fulfilling that potential. I haven't looked closely at her numbers, efficiency. She may not be way up there in the efficiency numbers, but yeah, she's definitely been a pleasant surprise to a team that really needs to start developing all that young talent they have.
All right, so Rice is on board with yes. Stephen, how about you about thoughts about Taylor Hill possibly being in our running for biggest first half surprise?
Yeah, I mean, I agree also. I mean, for me, I didn't expect her whenever I first, the season first started, I didn't expect her really to come in and have an impact like she's had. But I mean, it's not so much that her game is, off the charts fantastic. To me, it's more of the little things that she does to help her team. And I think that is what really makes a player and makes them stand out, especially when you don't expect them to have an impact. And for me, coming in, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I wasn't really expecting too much from her. And to see how well she's done, it's pretty good. I like it.
2 votes for yes about Taylor Hill. Pat, what do you think about her possibly being in the running, I guess, for biggest first half player surprise?
Well, you guys are probably going to hear me rave about Taylor much more later, so I'm going to keep this answer kind of short. But yes, and yes. I'm a huge Taylor Hill fan. I'm ecstatic to see her produce in the way that she is. I actually had this conversation with Marcus a little bit earlier this year. Taylor's efficiency isn't that great this season, but one of the biggest reasons for that is because she's become the player in a Mystics uniform that the players look to when the shot clock is running down. She gets the ball at the end of the clock for them now. She's taking a lot of shots under duress. So her efficiency isn't great, but I think that plays a big role in it. But yeah, I've been absolutely ecstatic and happy about Taylor. But the only reason I wouldn't call her as a surprise is because I personally would I vote yes that she's a surprise, but I wouldn't call her my surprise solely because I did expect this of her. I'm kind of happy that she's having this kind of resurrection type season.
All right, 3 are on board with this. Crystal, what do you think? Taylor Hill also possibly in your mind in the running for biggest first half player surprise in your mind, yes or no, and why?
No, not really. I actually knew Taylor Hill could produce the way she's producing. I just think the fact that she did get pregnant took her a little bit of time. Some players take more time than others, but I'm not surprised. I mean, I was expecting Taylor Hill to be where she is right now as soon as she came out of Ohio State. It's a new game for a lot of those college players. Some people come out and they have it immediately, and some people it takes a little bit longer. So I'm not really surprised about her. I knew she could do it. Kind of took a little bit, but at the same time, I mean, it takes certain players a certain time to get into their groove of WNBA system. So I'm not surprised at all.
Crystal, not surprised. Eric, what about you? Taylor Hill, in your mind, does she belong in biggest first half player surprise in your mind? Yes or no, and why?
Somewhat. I think I'm with Crystal and Pat in that I'm also a Taylor Hill fan. I think she's had this in her for a while now, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised she didn't really show it earlier. Obviously the pregnancy kind of interrupted things, if you will. But when I heard she was when I heard she was staying home in the off season to work with Eric Tebow personally on her game, that's huge, because I think when you talk about player development, when they go overseas, they get more experience, but they don't really have the opportunity to. Another example is as a Sky fan, when Courtney Vandersloot worked with Chris Hypa, her personal trainer, one-on-one, the season after that she broke out. So I think it's when these players get more time to work with their trainer or their coaches one-on-one and develop certain skills that they wouldn't have the green light to do overseas on a foreign team. I think that's when you really see the most drastic improvements from season to season. And in Taylor Hill, it's coming in her aggressiveness. She's always had the speed, the athleticism, the ability to get to the rim, but she's drawing fouls at an insane rate this season. And that's been one of the main reasons why she's been able to kind of carry the load for the Mystics on the perimeter. Whereas in the past, it's been kind of the motion offense sort of thing, scoring by committee. But I think she's pretty much, the alpha dog on the perimeter now. So yes and no. Like I think a lot of casual fans might see her as a surprise, and certainly she'll be they look at the volume, like her points per game have been way up. So that's people are going to look at that and say, oh, well, most improved, most improved. She's also, playing a lot more minutes, taking a lot more shots, but part of that's because, she's able to, whereas in the past she probably would have been comfortable doing it. So yes and no. I think it's, as Pat said, it's a pleasant surprise, but as someone who's watched her play for a while, I think she's always had this in her. It just took an off season of hard work to kind of get it out there.
All right, guys, we're going to go in inverse order now. Go from Eric across from left to right now. Eric, we're now going to go to who everyone thinks is your biggest first-half surprise team-wise through the first half. Eric, who is it and why?
Okay, my biggest surprise team-wise in the first half, I'm going to be a negative Nancy, and biggest disappointment, like surprising disappointment, that's got to be the Phoenix Mercury. Because when they brought back Diane and when they brought back Penny, basically the entire core of the 2014 championship team, which just ran roughshod through everybody. That was one of the best teams I've ever seen at any level. When they brought that core back, everyone was saying, okay, well, they won 20 games last year without these players. How good are they going to be this year? And that was put to rest pretty quickly. Their defense is so bad this year. Like they've never been a great defensive team, but it seems to me like Brittany Griner's kind of regressed, committing a lot of silly fouls, not really defending like we know she can. Diana Taurasi has given up all semblance of trying to play defense. Like that's completely out the window. Penny's getting old, and even their bench, which is supposed to have been improved, it didn't really show anything. They traded their first round pick, Courtney Williams, already. So. The Phoenix Mercury, I think they still have it left in the tank, and with this new playoff system, with the one-game playoff, you never know what's going to happen. But I think a lot of people, including myself, I'll put my neck out there too. We expected the Phoenix Mercury to be contending, at the top again, and that hasn't happened. That's not even close. They're a middling team right now. They're close to not even having a playoff spot right now. So that shows you how disappointing they've really been.
So Eric looks ahead to the biggest disappointment question being asked next and uses Phoenix for the biggest disappointment instead of biggest first-half surprise. Eric, I guess, has psychic mind-reading powers now. Crystal, who is your biggest first-half surprise team-wise this year and why?
Okay, I will wait for the disappointment question. But biggest surprise team-wise, I know people probably want me to say LA, but I'm not surprised. I am going to say... it's kind of insane. It kind of falls under disappointment. So because I don't want to rush ahead, I'm just going to say LA because, earlier in the season, people weren't expecting LA to be number one. They were expecting LA to probably be third or fourth, especially with this new format, seeing how 1 and 2 pretty much gets to bye and everybody else have to fend for themselves. So I'm going to go with LA on that aspect because they're just playing tremendous basketball. 21 and 3. They've tied a record, almost broke the record for the best start in WNBA. I'm going to have to go with LA. I don't think anyone expects them to get as far as they have. I don't think anyone expects them to get close to that record. So they will be my surprise team.
So Crystal will pick Los Angeles for her biggest team first-half surprise. Pat, what about you?
I'm gonna have to agree with Crystal. I think we're gonna be doing this all night, maybe. I've gotta agree with her. The Sparks have been the biggest surprise for me, not in terms of their production, in terms of victories. For me, watching the Sparks the last couple years, it just seemed like they didn't enjoy playing together. It seemed like the chemistry was pretty bad. Nobody wanted to be out there with each other. Nobody really wanted to look for anybody else. There was a lot of selfishness going on. And I kind of questioned the Brian Agler hiring because one of the biggest problems with LA was I felt they needed to get a little bit younger. And then looking at the roster this season, there's a lot of talent on that roster, and there's somebody who's not going to get minutes. There's somebody that's not going to get shots. And this is the most talented roster they've had in the last couple of years. And so I wasn't sure how the chemistry was going to be. I wasn't sure how they were going to play this season. And I was kind of skeptical of what they were going to be able to do. Not just the victories that they've had, but the manner in which they've done it. They look like a team that has been playing basketball together for a few years. They look like a team that enjoy being out there. They enjoy covering for one another. They enjoy playing basketball. Really, they're playing basketball the way that it should be played. And it's a beautiful thing to see. It's a beautiful thing to experience. And what makes me happiest about it is the fact that Candace Parker was left off the Olympic team and she's able to strut across the TV screen and look at her team at the top of the league every week. So
I agree with that one. So 2 votes for LA as biggest surprise for the first half. Steven, how about you?
Yeah, I would have to say LA as well because of the reason is, first of all, they went through that huge coaching mess. We remember that a couple of years ago. I'm sure you remember that very well when they went through the whole coaching change and all that. And now the chemistry is very, very good. Candace Parker looks like the Candace Parker we all thought we would see. And I really believe, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one. Is that Olympic snub that she got? She was not on the Olympic team, as we know. The snub that she got, I feel that's what's kind of drived her, and not only drived her for her personal season, but she's the driving force behind this team. And we all know the Stars always the driving force behind the team. But I feel that extra motivation of not being on the Olympics, and she was like, all right. She's kind of like the Tim Duncan of the WNBA, where she's not going to get pissed off and come out and take it out and go like Donald Trump on Twitter. She's going to go and let her game do the talking on the court. And look what she's done. Right now, LA Sparks are now 21-3 in the West, best record in the whole league. So you know what? I think they've done pretty well for themselves. Coming in to the season, did not think LA would be number 1 in the entire league. I thought they'd maybe be 2 or 3. I thought it would be Minnesota again, but they proved me wrong.
So 3 votes for Los Angeles as biggest first half surprise. Mr. Rice, how about you?
This is we're talking positive surprises here?
Yeah, it could be either one. Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
It's at your discretion.
Well, at the risk of having Eric block me on Twitter, I'm going to say Chicago. I just don't know about that ball club. I don't understand why Jessica Breland is not getting much in the way of minutes. They've got the Jamera Faulkner has been a big surprise. A lot of people want to trade one of them immediately, Vandersloot or Faulkner. That's just stupid. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope they get into this first and second one-and-done round and surprise all of us, myself especially. But Elena's shoulders are only so broad, and I don't know how far she can carry that club. They're 5-7 on the road. They've split their last 10 games coming up to the break. I've been moderately disappointed in what I've seen from them this year.
We now, folks, welcome into tonight's program from XL Sports. Mike Peden joining us from the land of 10,000 lakes in the great state of Minnesota. Mike, good to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks. Had a little bit of trouble connecting, so when all else fails, go to your smartphone.
When in doubt, exactly. When nothing goes right, go left. Mike, we're just kind of talking about, for right now, again, the first half of the season at this point. Mike, just to kind of get you off and running tonight, which team has been your biggest, or which team was your biggest first half surprise this first half of the season?
Biggest first half surprise was Los Angeles. There were a lot of folks wondering how well was this team going to mesh, and I think winning 20 of the first 21 games certainly shocked everybody, and they looked invincible for a time. And half-game lead on Minnesota, they've proven that their balance is much better than a year ago. Wnba is thriving, and I think they understand that we've got a lot of great post players. They have a better balance in their guard units. They look tough to beat. We'll see what happens. I thought Chicago might have figured out a little bit more. little surprised to see them. And then Washington was another minor surprise. Usually they're able to get more value than they should with their start. Here they are, still fighting for a playoff spot. So those are the three teams that really got my attention in the first half of the year.
Guys, I think of two teams as my biggest surprise. Of course, LA is up there because I think I'm pretty much with everybody. I really thought that Los Angeles was going to be maybe third, maybe fourth, maybe team was going to probably find the back door again, like they have the past 2 years to get into the playoffs again. But then all the roster turnover for a bit, and then seeing them get off to the start, it's like how long can they carry this momentum through the season again, and they go unbeaten to start again in those two very epic games already with Minnesota, one more to come in a couple weeks. LA's one, but guys, I'd probably say maybe 1B, if not my biggest one, though, is Atlanta. I think that we also probably had very low expectations for the Dream coming off of their season last year in the lottery, coming off of their numerous appearances in the league final, and them sort of turning it 180, much like Los Angeles again, in spite of them not really, I guess probably with Michael Cooper still being at the helm, I guess, and again leading them to a very surprising start. So I'd say Los Angeles and Atlanta as my two picks for biggest first half surprise. As we move on now, guys, we'll start again with Steve Rice for this next one. Steve, give us your first half disappointment this first half of the season. Who is it and why?
First half disappointment. Well, so the Mystics were mentioned. I'll go with them. I'm a pretty big Mystics fan. A big Mike Tebow fan. Albert Lee wrote a pretty good piece recently about the Mystics being in that treadmill mode where they're just good enough to sneak into the playoffs, but not bad enough to wind up with a 1 or a 2 lottery pick. They lost their last 7 straight going into the break, I believe, and they had some injuries. I think things would be different if they had LaToya Pringle the entire season, but stuff happens. Other teams lost players as well, but I've been disappointed in the Mystics. I don't know what the answer is. Some kind of trade. I don't see them as a big free agent target. You never know, but overall, and I'm sure Mike is disappointed too where they're at right now. But I'd have to go with the Mystics.
So Steve Rice will pick the Mystics for his first half disappointment. Steven, how about yours and why?
I gotta agree again. Say Washington. I think we'll be agreeing all night. I mean, I will say Washington because it's a little bit. Here's the thing, though, guys. Look, Washington went into this Olympic break on a 7-game losing streak. They're 9-15, and with the talent that they have, Emma Miesemann, who is very, very good. I mean, we have a lot of talent on that team, and I kind of expected more. I didn't. Now, mind you, I didn't expect them to be number 1 or 2 in the East, but I expected them to be a little bit more up than they are. 9-15, not very good record-wise. I believe since they do combine the standings now in both conferences for the playoffs, I think they're somewhere near the bottom with that record. If not, yeah, they are near the bottom. I just have it right in front of me. Them and Seattle tied, but I mean, they have more talent. It's kind of like the same thing with LA. I would have said a couple of years ago, where LA had the talent, they just couldn't put it together. And I think we're seeing that now with Washington. They have talent. As free agency was just mentioned, I agree. I don't know who would want to go to Washington in free agency. Kind of like the same thing here in San Antonio. I really don't know who would want to come to the Stars in free agency as well. So I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I feel like a little bit of two different scenarios where Washington has the talent, where San Antonio is obviously rebuilding. So that Washington would be my disappointment in that one.
All right, Pat, 2 votes here for the Mystics being the biggest first half disappointment this year. Who is yours and why?
Well, I'm gonna give you a 1A first, because the 1A in terms of biggest disappointments for me this year was actually a transaction. I was heartbroken to see New York cut Amaris Alston for Shoni Schimmel. I'm starting the campaign. Hashtag sign Amaris Olsen. Get her back in the league. Somebody needs
We'll
to
take her in San Antonio.
But I'm actually gonna take this disappointment and split it 3 ways, because there are 3 particular teams that have I mean unanimously underperformed in terms of the expectations I had for them. I'm actually gonna start off in relative closeness to me. The Wings, they've been markedly inconsistent this season. Part of that has to do with injuries. Skylar coming back a little bit slower than they expected, and then the injury to Glojo, just kind of blew their sails, took the wind out of their sails before the Olympic break. But the biggest thing for me with them has just been really the offense. They haven't really done a good job of finding good shots on offense. Things kind of change based on the personnel that's on the floor, which I'm not a fan of. I'm a big proponent of coaches. I believe that a good coach takes advantage of the skills that their players have. And with Dallas, I have a lot of questions in terms of their offense because their best players aren't really being put in the best positions to succeed. It started to happen a little bit more once Skylar took the floor, but when she's not on the floor, shot selection gets a little shoddy. Odyssey starts seeking her shot a little bit more than she probably should, and it just kind of gets a little crazy out there on offense for them, and they kind of stall a little bit. Washington. They've been mentioned a few times, but I think the biggest thing there is just Tebow has way too much talent. He looks down his bench every night and he sees all these kids who can legitimately play WNBA minutes. They have got to take the chance, package a couple of these young kids together and go out and get somebody who legitimately is going to demand, if not a double team, who's going to demand the number 1 spot on the scout report. They're going to have that. Mieseman is just a couple years out from that mean streak. I mean, I keep seeing so many articles written about her taking that next step. I just don't think it's there. I think it's going to take another couple of years for her to really get to that fully realized potential and get in that attack mode. And it's unfortunate for Washington because she's got the talent to do it, but I just don't see it happening. And I think the best thing that could happen for them is doing that. However, I will say that getting Laura Sanders in is going to be positive for them. She could potentially be that player for them because she was the number 1 player for Turkey in the Olympics, and so she's got experience doing that. But 3/4 of the season is done, so it's really just going to be difficult. And then I'm gonna have to tackle Chicago last here, being that that's the city that I'm from. They've been my second favorite team for a while now, up until this season. I just haven't been happy with coaching in Chicago this year. Cappy's not getting the looks that she needs to get. Imani Boyette should have been the starter from day 1. Jessica Breland should be getting more minutes. Erica De Souza shouldn't be getting as many minutes. Clarissa Dos Santos actually outplayed De Souza in the Olympics. And I think the Olympics is going to be really good for a lot of teams because a lot of coaches who are sitting talent on their bench got to see those kids produce. A Stu Endor should not be sitting on the bench in San Antonio. There's no reason she should be sitting on the bench for Jana Pell, who takes 2 shots every 3 games. That's unacceptable when you're not winning basketball games. But Chicago, being that other disappointment, they've just got to put their best players on the floor and go out there and play basketball. Jessica Breland isn't doing you any good sitting at the end of the bench.
All right, Mike. So Pat is going to go with Dallas, Washington, and Chicago as his 3 biggest disappointments. Mike, which team in your mind has been your biggest disappointment this first half and why?
Well, if I said Minnesota, I would be run out of the state. So we can rule them out. Washington. I think we're used to seeing them do a little more, but at the same time, they've had trouble getting big-name players to participate, and so they're always having to go with younger folks, kind of unprovens. And so, in a sense, I don't want to say they've overperformed, but it feels that way at times. And Dallas, maybe not so much this year. They're still in the thick of it in the playoffs, but if you look at the history of that franchise over the last few years to go off the previous points, they've been kind of stuck in the same zone. Last year they scraped their way into the playoffs. The previous year they just missed it. So they've had a chance to develop, and they have some pretty good names with Skylar Diggins, Lori Johnson, Courtney Paris, who's become a proficient rebounder, and yet we still haven't been able to see them break through and really challenge teams. I think that a lot of us think they could, the pieces they have. So I would say Dallas, but more so from a long-term perspective in terms of not performing to expectations. I would give Dallas the edge over Washington. But those are the two teams that I think could have done more with what they had. And I heard Atlanta briefly. They can be erratic, but it seems like they figured some things out, and we could end up seeing them in the playoffs.
So KT, Mike's going to go with Dallas and Washington as his two biggest disappointments. Crystal, who do you think is your biggest disappointment this first half of the season? There's a lot out there in regards to, again, we've touched base with the Mystics and the Wings so far. But Crystal, how about, in your mind, your biggest disappointment this first half of the season is who and why?
I only have one, and I'm going to have to go with Indiana. I was expecting Indiana to be a lot better this season. I think Stephanie White making that announcement that she was going to go to Vanderbilt kind of put that team on a roller coaster ride. They haven't been the same since then, and they started off playing pretty strong, and then ever since that announcement was made, they've kind of just been average. And you know, when you have a team with a player like Tamika Catchings on it, it's kind of weird to see that team being so average. I would have thought that they'd be, you know, high up in the playoff ranks, but they're pretty much in the middle, and they're struggling to keep that spot so far. But I'm gonna have to go with Indiana on that one.
So, Eric, Crystal picks the Fever as a first-half disappointment, rightfully so. Again, the announcement, of course, made by Stephanie White. Again, sort of that minor disconnect between her team and the coaching staff when that was announced. Eric, who do you think is your biggest first-half disappointment and why this year?
Well, I think I already said my biggest first-half disappointment was the Mercury, but that was like 20 minutes ago already. So I'll just piggyback off what some other people said here. Washington, yeah, I think was pretty disappointing. Although the injury bug has really bitten them hard. They've had a really tough time sustaining like consistent rotations. For a young team, that's kind of a difficult thing to go through. Although they do have a lot of depth, so yeah, it is pretty disappointing. Although yes, definitely Latoya Sanders, Laura Pringle, whatever you want to call her, she's really good. She's going to make an immediate impact, especially on defense. So I'm definitely looking for that to be a factor in the second half. And yeah, I'm a little disappointed in my Sky as well. Trust me, no one is harder on the Sky than I am, so Steve, I'm not going to block you. Very disappointed in Dos Santos not getting any playing time. I really thought she earned the opportunity last year before they went out and got Erica. You know, it's kind of just a center by committee. It was just, you know, whoever wants this job, step up and take it. And she really took it. She really plays very well. And of course, in the Olympics, as Pat said, I think she averaged a double-double. So I really want to see her get some more playing time. Cappy has been a huge disappointment. Yes, I definitely agree with Imani. She needed to play more too. But the good news is I think they're starting to figure that out. You know, you saw with their starting lineup change before the break there. They're starting Boyette, they're starting Cheyenne Parker. So hopefully we can get some of that going in Chicago, get the youth movement kind of going a little bit, maybe sneak into the playoffs. But yeah, next to Phoenix, that would probably be my number one disappointment there.
Now, Eric, I agree with you with what you brought up 20 minutes ago about Phoenix being by far the biggest disappointment. I think when you look at it, guys, they're able to kind of, as Eric alluded to again, they're able to rebuild their core a bit from 2014. They put out all these ads about, we're out for redemption, I'm claiming false advertising here with that of what we've seen from this team. You know, very dysfunctional, I think. You know, the start of the first half of the season, you know, the 0-4, 0-5 start, you know, just on the losing way to start the season. They get back a little bit, but still, though, there's still many problems, though. Defensively, the bench depth has been a problem, too. And along, though, guys, well, all the on-court antics, too, has been also a pretty big shame, though, to see in regards from with Taurasi and Griner picking up technical fouls plus suspensions, too. You know, so, you know, like we said, though, like Eric, you know, alluded to as well, but kind of, you know, echoing his point again, you know, they're able to get that core back in 2014, and they have been nothing like that 2014 since this part of the season getting underway. So I'm going with Phoenix as my biggest first half disappointment. Going back in inverse order real quick. Eric, I know that we weren't supposed to be giving out MVPs through the first couple games of the season, but now we're kind of through the first half. Eric, in your mind, I'm sure I know it's probably a two-horse race right now for MVP, but Eric, in your mind, who probably gets your first half MVP vote and why?
My vote is Nneka Ogwumike. And before I go any further, all due respect to Tina Charles, like I would have no problem if she got that award too. But I think the way Nneka's played, I just haven't really seen anything like like it in the past few years at least. Just her ability to consistently, like every single possession, hammer out that great post position, catch the ball. She's got stick 'em on her hands or something because she always catches the basketball. Goes up strong, finishes with either hand. The footwork in the post is amazing. She's shooting 71% from the field, and that's not on small volume. That's a pretty big sample size. And defensively, I believe she's actually kind of underrated because she's the one who communicates all the plays on defense. She plays much bigger than what she is on D. She's an intelligent player. Her motor, like she's basically been the perfect post player this season. MVP, people talk, and it's a legitimate argument because you think about what about the player who's basically carrying her team, which is Tina Charles, and that is true. But I'm not convinced that Tina Charles is much of a different player than she was last year. Like she's been racking up the assists, that's for sure. But I think she's kind of cooled off in that area. Whereas Nneka, she's always been a pretty consistent passer, I feel. And this LA team's they pass their passing is downright surgical. Like, and Nneka's just another cog in that in that area. But just the ability, because like for her to go out and grab 20 and 10 like almost every night. You know what you're getting from her. She gets to the free throw line like nobody's business. She's impossible to box out. Just there's nobody playing at a higher level than she is right now, and I think the stats back that up. So I got to go with Nneka Ogwumike.
All right, Crystal, one vote from Eric for Nneka Ogwumike for first half MVP. Crystal, who gets your vote and why?
I mean, I guess I'm just not going to have any opinions in because everybody keeps taking them. I mean, everybody keeps taking the same thought. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go. I mean, honestly, it's Nneka Ogwumike's to lose. I don't think the Sparks go 21-3 without Nneka, in all honesty. I mean, I don't think, people would like to say it's Candace Parker's team, but this year it's been Nneka's team. If I don't know, what Nneka's been eating. I don't know what kind of bacon she cooks in the morning. I don't know what kind of milk she likes with her Wheaties, but whatever it is, I mean, she has to keep it going. She's just playing phenomenally well, and no disrespect to Tina Charles, but I have to agree with Eric. I mean, we haven't seen much of anything that was different from last year, this year. Whereas Nneka, it seems like every year Nneka gets better at something. This year, it's been her efficiency. I mean, she's 71%. That has to be a record. I mean, that's not easy to do, to go out there every night and consistently get buckets, as some of the young kids in the hangout would probably say. But it's definitely have to be Nneka so far. She's just playing phenomenally well, and she's half of the reason why LA is playing so great.
All right, Mike, 2 votes for Ogwumike for MVP. Mike, who's your first half MVP and why?
I'll make it 3 votes. And to answer your question, Crystal, I know one thing that Nneka eats is Chipotle. I did a midway through the season, and she mentioned she's a big Chipotle fan. So I don't know what they put with burritos, but it's hard to argue. And I've looked at some other candidates. I know Tina Charles is the popular choice outside of Nneka. It's tough to argue against someone who is blowing away several offensive records. The field goal percentage, she's at 71%. I think there's only one game where she shot under 50%. Her offensive rating and her efficiency rating are also tops in the league. And I have to agree with Crystal. The Sparks, I think, are as successful as they are because they realize that they have some other great players, and I think I noted this a couple years ago that the Sparks sometimes forget that they have all of these other athletes that can help the star, Candace Parker and others. Tina Charles has been consistent. I mean, she's kind of doing the same thing, and Epiphany Prince is supposed to return, so I don't know if that hurts her campaign or not. But seeing New York, they were about as good as they were a year ago. LA was kind of a team trying to figure themselves out until Candace Parker came back, and now they realize that it doesn't always have to be Candace Parker. And Nneka is mature, she's poignant, poised, a great leader. I think she, statistically and just emotionally, she has the qualities that would be tough to argue against her for MVP. So if Nneka doesn't get it, I hope whoever does, they make a really good argument for, because I can't see any other award winner at this point.
All right, Pat. So 3 votes, all in favor of Wnba over Charles right now for MVP. But what do you think about your first half MVP?
Well, I might tick some people off with the way I break this answer down. But I guess I'm gonna be the Lone Ranger here because Tina Charles gets my vote. She gets my vote because I've always been one of those people who I believe in the definition of awards, and the definition of the word the award, it's MVP, it's most valuable player. If you take Tina Charles away from that New York Liberty team, they're nowhere near where they are right now. And then you also consider that they have 18 wins right now. They have 10 wins on the road. 10 wins on the road with virtually no point guard. They went into this season expecting Brittany Boyd to be the starter. She wasn't prepared for that role, so they've kind of gone to old reliable and moved Tanisha right back to the point. And they've done all of this without Epiphany Prince. The reason that it's easy for me to give this, and it's relatively easy for me to give it to Tina, is because I think a lot of what Nneka accomplishes has more to do with the talent around her than herself. And this isn't to take anything away from the season Nneka's having. I would have absolutely, like you guys mentioned with Tina Charles, I would have absolutely no problem with Nneka winning the award. But the thing for me is, I've long maintained that Candace Parker's best skill as a basketball player is as a passer. She's 6'5". She sees the floor like a guard. She handles the ball like a guard. So what has happened this season is that Brian Agler has put her in a position where she's making a lot more decisions as opposed to taking shots. And what that has done is that has put Nneka Ogwumike at the rim to literally catch and finish. And the 71% shooting is impressive, but it's a little bit less impressive to me because as I've watched Nneka more closely as she's had the season that she's had, there's been games where she's blown wide open layups. And I mean, if we take away the wide open layups that she's blown, she should be shooting 75%. So with that being said, if you took Nneka away from the Sparks the same way that I portrayed taking Tina Charles away from the Liberty, I don't necessarily think that the Sparks would be anywhere near 21-3. But Jantel Lavender is a very capable player. She could play 30 minutes for that team and be very productive. They would be able to successfully get some of those other people on the bench minutes. A lot of people may not necessarily think that Ann Waters belongs in the league because she hasn't been the W in the last few years. But go check her overseas. She's still dominating overseas with her kids sitting on the sidelines yelling her name, and she's responding to them the whole time. So, I mean, I have to give it to Tina Charles for that reason. And I also do want to make clear, I was very, 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 very hard on Tina after, the Connecticut situation. I was kind of disappointed in the way it was handled in addition to the way that she played that season. So to see her change her game the way that she's having, and the way that she has, and reinvent herself the way that she has, the Olympics was like a Tina Charles show for me because she literally, I mean, everywhere she caught the ball, she was a threat, and she made good on those things. And it just made me so happy to watch her because I think it's going to come and be really positive to watch this final stretch of the season.
All right, so 3 votes for Ogwumike, 1 vote now for Charles from Pat. Steven, who is your first half MVP and why?
It's going to be Nneka Ogwumike because, we've seen, like I said before in the previous few things here, we see what happens with LA. They are the best team in the league. There's no doubt about it. And personally, they are, I don't know if this is going to come up later, but they are my pick to win it all this year if it gets down to that. But if you take Nneka off that team, I don't know if LA is at the top of the league right now. And yes, I know what Candace Parker can do. She is one of the best in the game for sure. But nobody can do it alone. Jantel Lavender is very, very good, but nowhere near the level of Nneka Ogwumike. And I feel that Nneka right now is playing out of her mind. I love Tina Charles, don't get me wrong. Tina Charles is great. But based on performance, based on the team's record, and based on how her improvement from year to year, I have to say Nneka.
All right, Steve Rice, you've had some time to digest and get your thought process together. 4 votes on the panel for Ogwumike for MVP for first half. 1 vote so far from Pat on TC being MVP. Mr. Rice, who you got?
Let me throw a little historical perspective at you here. That 71% for Nneka is obviously insane, and I hate comparing women players to NBA players, but in 1973, at the age of 36, Wilt Chamberlain shot 72.7 for the year. that's in his last season. That's how off the charts that number is. But like Pat, I'm going to go with Tina. The first New York game I saw this year, besides just her being impressive as always, she looked different to me this year, and I was wondering, did she drop 10 pounds? Is she just leaner? What has she been up to? And that's the deciding factor to me between NECA and Tina, and I respect, like Pat said, the definition of the award is most valuable player, not most gaudy numbers. For my money, Tina doesn't have as much help as NECA does, and that's what it comes down to for me. You got two ladies having terrific years. Both got their teams near the top of the standings. But I look at the overall, the thing that Stephen mentioned about take her away from this team and take her away from that team. New York would be in much more dire straits than LA, and that's the decider for me. Is not what's her shooting percentage or any efficiency numbers, but I got to go with Tina as well.
You know, I'm actually with Pat and Steve Rice on this one, guys, only because I can make a case for both, but I think that we probably do or probably forgot to consider, though, that Wnba will probably have to share first place MVP votes with Candace Parker from LA, but it's probably the only thing that may hold her back from winning the MVP award, because also, like Pat and Steve probably brought up as well, again, about it being the most valuable player again. And what I've said, though, too, guys, plenty of times is we see a lot in pro sports, I'm sure you guys have seen it, though, too, is something I like to call change of scenery. When a player who's scuffling or struggling in a certain team and they get dealt or signed elsewhere, that a change of scenery is always 9 times out of 10 good for that athlete. We've seen what it's done, though, with TC going from the Sun to New York. And, again, we can all make cases for both players there. I think, though, that Charles gets it by maybe head and shoulders only because Candace Parker and Wnba sharing votes may hold her back from winning the award, though. But don't get me wrong, though, those numbers are something very special to see. Going back in regular order, Steve, we'll stay with you for this next one. Steve, if you have to name a first-half coach of the year, who is it for the first half and why?
Oh, me?
No, Mr. Rice. Mr. Rice. Sorry about that. I know it's tough for this to distinguish.
Well, I'm going to go with Brian Agler, and not just because of their record. There's a lot of ego on that team. Always has been.
Always will be.
I may be overestimating his impact, but I'll go with Brian. They're 21-3. They won 8 out of their last 10 games coming up to the break. They're 10-2 on the road, as is Minnesota. Not to slight Cheryl Reeve or Lambier, but there's a cohesion this year in that Sparks team we haven't seen. That was touched on earlier, and I'll go with Agler for that reason.
All right, Mr. Anderson, 1 vote here for Brian Agler of LA for first half coach of the year. Stephen, who do you have and why?
Oh man, this is tough. I'm actually going to, for once, disagree. I'm going to say Michael Cooper, because we all talked about it earlier. Nobody expected Atlanta, going off of last season, to be where they are now. Now in the East right now, of all the teams, I mean, other than New York, they're right there, and of course Indiana's there too. But nobody expected Atlanta to be where they are. You have, obviously, we talked about the Shoni Schimmel trade earlier, how all that really went down. That went down. I was a little surprised. I was like, okay. But knowing that she came to camp a little overweight, and it seems like, Michael Cooper's not messing around. If he wants to set like a precedent, if we're going to have some fit players here, we're not going to kind of like slack off a little bit. And I guess he got that impression that that's exactly what she was doing. So he kind of, quote unquote, laid down the law in Atlanta. And I mean, he's my coach of the year mainly because he surprised me. I mean, Atlanta looks good. I mean, they're probably not going to go very far with, with New York doing good things in the East over there. But I mean, I like Michael Cooper. I wouldn't mind him coming and coach San Antonio when Dan retires.
All right, Pat. So 1 vote for Agler from Mr. Rice, 1 vote from Steven for Michael Cooper. Pat, who do you have for your first half Coach of the Year and why?
I'm gonna go a little bit unorthodox here. Jenny Busick.
Ooh.
Okay.
Seattle has been the most fun team to watch in the league for me this year behind the Sparks. And it's because, for those of you that don't know, I'm an aspiring coach. That's what I want to do with my life. And so I'm always looking at the game from that point of view in terms of how I would coach a team. And one of the biggest things that I've been extremely happy to see in Seattle, Alicia Clark led the nation in scoring as a post player in college. If she's going to be a starter in the WNBA, and she's already shooting last time I checked, I think she was shooting maybe 44% from 3. If she's going to be in this league, I think that you need to take advantage of her strengths. Jenny Busick is posting her up on a lot of big possessions this year, and I'm so happy to see that because it's very rare for me in the WNBA to see coaches really put players in positions to be successful. She's putting Jewel Lloyd and Sue Bird in screening roles with Lang Horn and Brianna Stewart, which is beautiful to watch. She's allowing Jewel to take players one-on-one off the wing. She's getting Bird 3-point looks from the wing so that she doesn't have to work too hard. And Stewie is playing really great defense, man. And the one question I had about her coming into the league was whether she would be able to defend with this level of physicality. But Busick has really, really taught her about angles and about how to really play good positional defense. It's not just about the help side blocks that she was getting a lot at Connecticut. She's legitimately standing up, guarding her man, and being successful. And considering the way that they've kind of had a revolving door with that backup post position in Seattle, and I mean, Crystal Thomas is a solid fit for them right now, but you had her in camp to begin the year. You know what I'm saying? You made the decision to cut her early on. So, it's kind of been a revolving door. They haven't been happy with what they've been getting off the bench in general. So for them to be in a position to potentially steal a playoff bid from a team that has a lot more talent than they have, I think Jenny needs to, get some recognition for that.
So that means we'll see RKT playing in Seattle tomorrow night at Key Arena versus LA, 7 o'clock on Time Warner Cable Sports and Time Warner Cable Deportes and NBA TV.
Hey, Callan, Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely, Stephen, go ahead.
Just to go off of that real quickly, and not to interrupt, but, Dan, not to be a homer either, but, Dan Hughes really does not get enough credit for what he has done with this Stars team. They are the bottom of the league, I do get that, but the fact that Kayla McBride is out for the rest of the season. Danielle Robinson hasn't even played this season. And to have his team in games, yes, they're not winning, but they have at least a chance to win. That is impressive. And then the team that he did beat, the one that impressed me the most was Indiana, when Mariah Jefferson went off for her career high. The things he has done with this team in getting the wins that they have done, he does not get enough credit. So, I mean, he's not the coach of the year for me, but I just want to say the guy deserves to get some credit for that.
Absolutely. Okay, Mike, we've got a bit of a mixed bag right now. We've got a vote for Agler, a vote for Cooper, and a vote for Busick for coach of the year for the first half. Mike, who do you have winning and why?
And they're all picks when you put it the arguments that way. I'm going with Agler, and if for no other reason, when it comes to these end-of-season awards, I'm not part of the voting panel, so what I say here, might be used or not. But historically, at least by my understanding, they tend to go with the teams that usually improve the most or do something unexpected. And the Sparks, I had shortchanged them, I guess, 21-3. Last year they had to scrape to get to 17 wins, of course. Candace Parker came back and helped play that record a little bit. I think it was somewhere around 17 wins. And so when you look at the questions entering the season, kind of where everyone was, I mean, you knew Minnesota was going to do well. We thought Phoenix would do well, and they haven't. LA is the one team that I think really exceeded their standing from last year to the point where I think that's going to give Brian Agler enough leverage to win Coach of the Year. I will say Seattle's fun to watch, and for a team that everyone thought was going to be out of the playoffs, they're still in it. I just can't see anyone outside of Eggler getting it right now. I mean, based on records, based on trends, narratives, I think it would be his to lose. But we'll see what happens. Coach of the Year can be a little tricky to pinpoint because there are so many intangibles that you can measure beyond records.
Okay, Crystal, 2 votes now for Agler, 1 vote each for Busek and Cooper in this one, along with Hughes getting a vote as well from Steven. Crystal, who do you believe wins your first half Coach of the Year award and why?
Well, first I want to apologize for the coughing, is why I had to mute myself. Sorry about that. Honestly, right now, it's between Agler and Reeves. I know a lot of Lynx fans are like, what? She said a Minnesota Lynx thing? I have no issues with the Lynx. I just don't want to see them win again. But it's between those two. I mean, I don't recall who said it. I think it was Mike. But, I mean, Minnesota, it's Minnesota. I mean, they have a good coach. The only issue I have with Minnesota is that they don't use their bench that much, and they really don't use a lot of their newer draft picks. But other than that, I mean, you can't really go against them. And, of course, Brian Agler, because look what he's doing with this team. Last year, they were just a disaster. Didn't know if they were going to make the playoffs. Didn't know how good they would be. But he's done something to that team, and he's turned it around. I mean, the players are more motivated. They're playing for each other and not for themselves anymore. And you got to give a lot of credit to Brian for that. So, I mean, it's between those two. It's either going to be Agler or Reeves. But I think ultimately it depends on who stays number 1 for longer.
So, Eric, Crystal's going to go with either Reeve or Agler for her first half Coach of the Year. Eric, who gets your vote and why?
Yeah, a lot of interesting arguments being made here. I think I'm going to go with Reeve for the simple reason because, people are going to say Agler because, well, he has the best team, and that's true. But the Lynx are only a half game behind them right now, so there's not really a lot of space separating the two teams. So I think it could go either way. Certainly the argument for Agler, that the Sparks are exceeding expectations, that's true as well. But, the Lynx came into the season, people are saying, they're maybe kind of getting kind of old, the bench is a little sketchy. So could it be said that they're exceeding expectations too? 21-4 is still a pretty freaking good record, And also because I think Reeve, I think that the way that team is run, they kind of put to rest a few stereotypes surrounding the Lynx that, they play their starters too many minutes. Reeve has actually done a really good job, in my opinion, of cutting back on her starters' minutes, at least her aging players somewhat. She's come on, she said publicly that, we realize that in order to continue winning games, we need to play our bench more. We need to have more faith in our depth. And Natasha Howard's play, when you talk about most improved player, she's up there as well. She's been brilliant.
And can I just add on to that? Don't forget they're getting Anna Cruz back after the Olympics. That's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, Anna Cruz. Yeah, she's going to be a big addition as well. So that's going to be a big addition for them because Waylon won't have to play as much. Augustus won't have to play as much. That could be everything for them because coming off the games in which the U.S. had to go all the way again, so sad. With Waylon and Augustus playing all those games over the Olympics, they got no rest. So with Cruz coming back, that'll be big for them too. But I digress. I think the Lynx have done a very good job of Reeve in particular. She's done a very good job of managing the minutes of her starters. We know that Sylvia Fowles has been somewhat injury prone her past few seasons, but her minutes have been down and she's producing at a high level again. Maya Moore is just Maya Moore. I mean, she's a robot. There's nothing really to say about that. But just the way they've been able to manage their minutes at a more effective rate and how they've been able to stay dominant. I mean, they're only a half game behind a team that tied the record for consecutive or best record through 21 games, I believe it was. So I'm voting for Cheryl Reeve.
So Eric will go with Reeve. I'm also in the 2-horse race with Reeve and Agler, only because I think Agler, guys, gets more leverage, I guess, for the turnaround he's put this team in. Of course, last year, no Candace Parker, really did not have the full roster intact up until the second half of the season last year, and the turnaround so far has been kind of like we saw with the Liberty a couple years ago when they went from middle of the road in the Eastern Conference to the top of the division table just last season with their turnaround. So Agler, I think, probably gets the benefit of the doubt for the turnaround at least. And like we said about improvement, I think Steven and Steve both touched base on the improvement and the leverage there. But Reba's, of course, always going to be in the mix, guys. I mean, when you win 3 titles in 5 years and you continue to set the bar, with being in first place or in second place or always being in the postseason mix and always dominating, you're always going to be up there. Cooper, I would agree with Steven Anderson about Cooper being in that mix too, with sort of Atlanta's turnaround too as well from from what we may have had for expectations for them as well. So ultimately, I'm going to go Agler, Reeve, and Cooper 1 and 3 in my voting for Coach of the Year. But it could go either way, as we already mentioned. Guys, we get ready now to talk about the second half of the season. We'll again go in inverse order. Start with Eric. Eric, as we get ready to start the second half of the season tomorrow, Eric, which is the biggest storyline beginning the second half of the season for the WNBA in your mind?
The biggest storyline. I have to pick just one?
You can. It's at your discretion. Doesn't matter.
Okay, my discretion. Beautiful. Okay. Obviously, I think we need to keep an eye on the race for the number 1 playoff seed. I mean, LA and the Lynx, I don't think there are many people out there who don't think it's going to go right down to the wire. You got 2 teams who are just off to historically great starts. And just people looking forward to playing them each other again. Like, that's going to be an amazing game. And
ESPN picked it up, I believe.
Yes, that's true. It's going to be on national TV, so yippee, they got something right. I'd say another big story for me would be the Indiana Fever as a whole, because not only do you have Stephanie White going to Vanderbilt after the season, but in case we forgot, Tamika Catchings is retiring after the year, right? So we're going to have the whole Farewell Tour going on. The players have to stay focused. They're in the middle of a playoff race. They gotta keep it together, because what are the Fever going to do after this season? I don't know. They probably don't know either. But the time is right now. You got to focus, and you're basically having your team leader and Hall of Fame player and your head coach both saying, "I'm done after this season." It's probably a little more difficult to get up and play for that, or it's more motivating. I don't know. I don't play, but that's something to watch for, I would say. And then how good can Brianna Stewart get? I don't know, because we haven't seen a rookie season since Candace Parker. So that'd be my top 3 storylines, I would say.
All right, so Crystal, Eric is going to go with Indiana as the storylines, Brianna Stewart's play for 2 of the 3 storylines, and also who gets the number 1 overall seed for the postseason race. Crystal, what is your biggest second half storyline and why?
I have a few as well. Of course, like Eric said, who's going to get number 1? That can go either way. Those are the 2 top teams, and everybody's trying to play catch up with them, and I don't think many people will catch up with them. Number 2 is to see how worse Phoenix can get. I mean, can they stay where they are? Can they get worse? Can they get better? I mean, that's probably the biggest thing I'm watching for. I mean, Diana Taurasi had a Monster Olympics, so I want to see if it could translate over to the Mercury, who really need her help on that end. And let's see. I want to see if, even though Connecticut's probably not going to make the playoffs, I want to see if they can make a little run with these past, these last 10, 11 games. So those are probably my 3 biggest storylines.
All right, Mike, so we have another vote for top seed. We also have Phoenix and Connecticut in the mix for if they can make a run somewhere. Mike, what second half storyline are you keeping your eyes on and why?
Well, I think the biggest one is what kind of hack game will Crystal bring for the September 6th game with LA Minnesota?
I second that.
Just to explain, if you're not familiar, she made a cameo in the first meeting at LA and had her top hat, which she screamed at. So that's my number 1. Right. It's hard not to see, okay, who's going to get that top seed. I mean, at the same time, both teams are safely in the top 2, and we've seen teams like Indiana make surprise runs before, and I think now that's going to be something to watch. Is there going to be another surprise team? I'm kind of seeing, can Dallas maybe figure things out, or can Seattle put together enough of a run? I think the biggest one is that logjam. I think for that 4 through 8 spot is LA, Minnesota, and New York are safely in. Atlanta's got a little bit of a cushion. Indiana's right behind them, but you've got all these teams that are just sort of fighting for positions with buys on the line in the 1-round playoffs. I think that's going to be the biggest storyline, is who kind of emerges from that crop, and if any of them can put together a run, because we've seen flashes from Atlanta, Indiana, and some of these other teams. even Phoenix is they're still hanging around. So can any of them surge ahead and put a scare into the big dog? I don't know if it will happen, but to me, that's the exciting part. And then I guess I'll cheat a little bit for Minnesota's end because we referenced Santa Cruz. I don't know if we had touched on it already, is kind of how everyone's going to reintegrate because no other team had 4 Olympians, or I guess 5 if you count Anna. How are they all going to mesh? It's going to be a very scary backcourt. I know that much. That backcourt has Augustus, Cruz, Montgomery,
Starters.
Perkins.
All starters.
I would not want to mess with those guys. And fatigue kind of set in, as we talked about 4 years ago with that team when it came to the finals. It's sometimes tough to measure because if you have a bad game, well, are they tired, or they just have a bad game, or did the defense do a good job on their assignments? So I'm kind of curious to see how they're all going to get back together and how long it's going to take for them to reorganize. They have a great cushion to work with, and they've got the tiebreaker with New York if they run into trouble. But how well can the Lynx regroup and that logjam through roughly 3 through 8 in the playoff races? Those are going to be the 2 stories to watch.
So, Pat, Mike's going to go with Lynx fatigue, perhaps, along with the logjam of the standings below the 1 and 2 spots. Pat, what second half storyline or storylines are you keeping your eyes on for the second half of the season?
The biggest storyline for me probably is going to be Phoenix. And it's going to be, and that's a twofold answer. One, I'm not fully sold on Los Angeles as a championship contender. And in terms of their play this season, obviously they've shown that they're at that level. But for me, I've always maintained that the playoffs is a totally different beast, and the old cliche is that everything is 0-0 in the playoffs. And I'm just not sold on the rotation more so in Los Angeles as opposed to some of the other teams in the league. And I'm obviously, if anybody that knows me or follows me on Twitter knows that I don't necessarily care for the Lynx. So them being a year older, I don't really buy them as championship contenders in a year where they had 4 Olympians and like we said, 5 with Cruz coming back. So the opportunity is there for Phoenix to still win a championship. I am not a gambling man, but one thing I know is that I wouldn't bet my money against Diana Taurasi. If they can get into the playoffs, I think they still have the potential to win the championship. I think the biggest problem in Phoenix, I think, and this is going to sound crazy for me to say this because I raved about her during the 2014 season, but Sandy Brondello is just not coaching this team well. A lot of those question marks are going to be answered for me within the next couple of days because where everybody just sees it as Phoenix not playing well, what I saw in the first half of the season was Penny knowing that this was going to be her last Olympics, trying to make sure that she didn't have another 2012 situation where she got injured right before the Olympics. Dee knew that she was going to be a very big part of the Olympics, just like BG. And at the end of the day, this is the best women's basketball league in the world. These are the best women's athletes in the world. When you have Glory Johnson jumping, on one side of you and Courtney Parrish blocking you out on the other side, and you're looking towards the Olympics and trying to make sure that you're healthy for the Olympics, it's selfish to look at it as a fan and say that, oh, they're professionals, they shouldn't worry about that. But at the end of the day, this is a dream come true for anybody, who plays a sport. So I saw a lot of that in the first half of the season, a little bit of tentativeness in terms of trying to preserve themselves and make sure that they were at a full go for the Olympics. So I'm interested to see how the rest of the season goes. If it doesn't go well for Phoenix, the moves this season kind of make me think that if the season doesn't end well, they might try to blow some things up because Candace Dupree hasn't looked comfortable at all this season. She's still one of the best players in the world, but she's forcing a lot of shots because she's not getting her shots. They're trying to force the ball into BG a lot more than they need to when this team has the talent that it has on the floor. But in addition to that, the changes that they made, I didn't necessarily think were necessary, but I'm happy with the changes that have been made. Kelsey Bone is going to be an Olympian one day. She's been an all-star and is going to continue to be an all-star in this league. And that's why I wonder about Dupree, is because Bone is going to need to get minutes. Chargai is going to need to get minutes in the second half of the season, and she even came directly back from the Olympics to Phoenix to get some extra time with the team. So those two players having to get minutes in terms of the talent on that team, but not having the continuity of being there a whole season, them having this time to practice with the team, I think is going to make a difference. And just knowing that, this is it for that team is going to be interesting to see. But in addition to that, I also just want to see how the playoff race ends up, because I honestly think that if Connecticut or Seattle is able to sneak into the playoffs, they have enough talent in terms of offensive ability to steal one game from a higher seeded team like an LA Sparks or like a Minnesota Lynx. And I really think that if Connecticut or Seattle could get into the playoffs, I trust I've literally watched Kurt Miller the last 10 years coach basketball. I trust his acumen to be able to win one basketball game. Jenny Busick has gone and been in NBA training camps and helped make decisions in terms for NBA teams. So she's been able to see the game from a little bit different point of view. I trust her to win one game in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, because I think, like I said, those two teams could be kind of spoilers for some of the better teams in the league.
All right, Steven, so Pat's going to go with Phoenix for the second half to see if they can make a run. He's also looking at the logjam, too, and perhaps an upset maybe in one of the early rounds of the one-and-done playoff format. Steven, what are you looking forward to most as your storyline for the second half of the season?
Okay, so I'm looking forward to, I'm going to have two. My first one is going to be the race for the number one spot, the number one overall seed. And I have a feeling it might come down to maybe the last couple weeks, maybe the last week of the season, maybe. It could, with how LA has played the first half of the season, with how Minnesota has played, it could be either one of those two. But based on experience, I would have to say Minnesota, just because of that factor. But then again, of course, anything can happen. We know it's the WNBA. The games change every day, and things change. The second one for me personally is going to be, just because I'm here in San Antonio, it's going to see how Mariah Jefferson's second half of the season goes. Her first half was a struggle, and obviously now with Kayla McBride out for the rest of the season for San Antonio, I'm interested to see, does she take on that leadership role, and will San Antonio make a trade? There's been some rumors going around that Dan could pull a trade off. Of course, last time we did that, Gia Perkins left San Antonio, and she went to Minnesota, and that pissed a lot of fans here off. So we'll see what he does, but those are my two.
All right, Mr. Rice, so Steven's going to go with the Stars and Mo Jeff specifically for one storyline, along with the race for 1 and 2. Mr. Rice, what do you have for your second half storyline, and why?
I'm going to go with Phoenix. I've never been a huge Phoenix fan. I'm not sold on Brondello, like I think Pat mentioned. But we're talking about it for what this is worth. It's a team with 6 Olympians. We have to include Lindsey Harding, who may or may not be a valuable late-season pickup. They split their last 10 games going into the break, but they seem to be pretty healthy. Taurasi was ridiculous in Rio. Griner played really well. I think she's still finding herself. I wish they would bring in Brittany's rookie season. They brought Jabbar in for a couple days. I wish they would do something like that again. I think she is far from her potential in terms of impact on this league. So I'm going to go with Phoenix as far as a dangerous. They're going to get in the playoffs, and they are going to be a dangerous team in the playoffs. I'm curious to see how New York does with Epiphany Prince coming in. She looks pretty healthy from what I can tell by the 15-second snippets of video on Instagram. That's not much for scouting, but we talked about Tina being an MVP. What she needs is a little more scoring help, and if Prince is ready, that could be a big X factor. And Minnesota, if Minnesota wins it all this year, I'm all in favor of having them wear a big embroidered letter D on their uniforms for Dynasty next year. Make that a capital D.
Or trade demand.
I think New York. I'm going to go with New York and Phoenix as far as making a late season run. One team is underachieved. New York is 18-8, 10-3 on the road. So I'm going to go with New York and Phoenix.
All right, so Steve Rice will pick the Mercury and Liberty as his second half storyline. I think, guys, I think we're all in favor, and I'm going to agree with most of the panel here, saying that it's going to come down to who gets 1 and 2. As Mike said, though, LA, Minnesota virtually have those 2 spots locked up for the time being, with so much, with not much time left to play for the regular season. But I think, though, that as we've seen, though, I would agree, though, that Minnesota is still everybody's favorite, and even with Los Angeles having a great start again, they have not proven themselves worthy to be that championship contender, as Mike and Pat both allude to. And I'm fully with you guys again. Until that someone can, knock Minnesota off the mountaintop, they're still the odds-on favorite. I would agree, but again, I'm gonna probably say that Minnesota and LA, and I think that a lot, though, guys, will ride on the last matchup of the regular season in a couple weeks on September 6th in Los Angeles. That, again, as you alluded to, just got moved up to ESPN 2 national coverage when the Lynx play the Sparks in the third and final regular season matches, because I think, guys, a lot could be determined and decided. And also, I think, as Mike brought up with tiebreakers, the tiebreaker falls under, or is going to be determined if, in fact, they tie on that game on the 6th of September, because, again, we had them split the first 2 games in that home-and-home series early this season. Todd Mintz says we know that the Lynx and Sparks will go down at the end. He wants to see, though, if Connecticut can continue to improve, and if the break did not slow them down, to see if they can catch the top 8 in the league this year. And we'll go back in regular order and going back to Steve Rice. Steve, I think you probably brought this up, though, but Mr. Rice, who do you see being the second half team that has to step their game up for the second half of the season, and why?
Has to step their game up. Boy, I got to go. Phoenix is the obvious choice for me. Your ridiculous talent, with even the smallest improvement or commitment to some defense. And with the addition of Bone and picking up Harding, who should help a little bit, I think Phoenix has got the most to prove.
All right, Steven, so Mr. Rice will go with Phoenix as the team that has to step their game up in the second half. Steven, who do you pick and why?
I'm going to go with Phoenix as well because, the thing is, I have to wonder, because Phoenix, with all that talent, they should be better than they are right now, and they're not. So I'm wondering, and I'm very curious, did that whole Brittany Griner, Glory Johnson drama in the offseason, did it really kind of mess with, the chemistry that was going on in Phoenix? Obviously, when Dallas and Phoenix played each other, everybody was watching to see Glory and Brittany go at it. Of course, we know Sandy Brondello took out Brittany as soon as Glory came on the court, so nothing really transpired there. But, I have to wonder, did that really kind of mess things up in Phoenix? There's a lot of it. There's been some talk, obviously Penny Taylor's last season, Diana Taurasi has been suspended because of her, she runs her mouth sometimes. So, you have to wonder what is going on in Phoenix. Because before the season, my pick was going to be Minnesota, Phoenix, and LA. So I'm wondering what's going on in Phoenix, and can they turn it around? That's the big question.
All right, Pat, 2 votes for Phoenix. What do you think about which team needs to step up the most in the second half of the season?
This is kind of a difficult one for me to answer because I've been sitting here since the question was posed. I've been sitting here looking at the standings, and I've been trying to decide. But there are 3 teams that stand out to me. Chicago and Phoenix both stand out to me because, in my opinion, if they don't finish the season stronger than they started, you have to make a coaching change. There's way too much talent in Chicago for them to be middling the way that they are. There's way too much talent in Phoenix for them to be middling the way that they are. Phoenix has made some questionable choices in terms of their personnel this season. I'm not a big Lindsey Harding fan. I personally felt like Courtney Williams should have gotten more minutes when she was in Phoenix because the problem that we've had all season has been guarding the ball, and she was by far the quickest player that we had in camp. And when you've got 14 losses in 24 games, what does it hurt to look down the bench and give your rookie a couple minutes? That just made absolutely no sense for me. The Bone trade was bittersweet for me because I've always been a Bone fan. I was happy to get her in the fold, but Courtney Williams is going to be a standout player in the WNBA in a few years, and this could be a problem for Phoenix going forward because some of the personnel decisions they made in kind of haste of trying to figure this season out may come back to bite them in the butt. Chicago is kind of the same way. There just hasn't been good personnel decisions in terms of who's playing where this season. I don't understand why Jessica Breland has an all-star season and then you decide to change her position when Elena Deladon can play the three perfectly fine. That just makes no sense to me. And I've always been a Pokey Chapman fan, so this has kind of been difficult for me to watch. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the betterment of the league, quality of basketball being raised. Something has to happen there. That team should be taking strides forward. When you look at the way that Faulkner and Vandersloot are playing right now, there is no reason that they should be sitting in the middle of the league when you have 2 point guards. You always have a point guard on the floor that's producing at a high level. But probably the team that I'm going to go with in terms of what I look for the most in the second half is going to be the Liberty. Swing Cash is retiring. They've attempted some things at the three since Lambeer has been there, but the answer has always been Swing Cash. They have nobody that can play the three spot on that roster right now. I understand that they're trying to move Tina out to that, but that's not going to happen next season. So if they don't finish this season strong, I don't necessarily know what's going to happen next for them because I don't see a lot of three players in the draft coming out. I don't see a lot of three players being on the free agent list for next year. And Lambeer has tried to go small and play some guards at the three, but in this day and age of the WNBA, when you look at players like DeWanna Bonner playing the three at 6'4", Candace Parker plays the three a lot at 6'5" for the Sparks. Elena Deladon plays the three a lot at 6'5". You can't play Tanisha Wright at 5'11" at the three and win a championship. Even Maya Moore is 6 foot 6'1". So the Liberty are really going to have to lock in and go all in this season to try to win a championship to really try to figure out what's next for them.
All right, Mike, so Pat's going to go with the Liberty as his thought and pick for second half step up. Mike, which team has to step up in your mind this second half of the season and why?
Well, statistically speaking, Dallas doesn't step up, they will be out of the playoff, and then you have to start wondering if they miss it again, or if they kind of struggle. Did we look at changing things up in coaching? Phoenix makes sense. Their chemistry hasn't returned to form from a couple of years ago, and there have been some questions about how well does Brondello manage the personalities on that team. I agree with a lot of these other ones. I think Atlanta might be a team to do it because if they could figure things out, and I talked about this with insiders and outsiders, Atlanta has some great talent. And they realize that they probably can go through the Padre, I think they do a lot better when she's not shooting more than twice as much as anyone her closest teammates. Atlanta seems to be in the thick of things, but if she's still 20-25 shots, they have a harder time doing it. It's really tough. Just if there's any one team that needs to step up, I mean, it'd be a little late to catch Minnesota most likely, but I'm looking at Dallas and Atlanta got an inside track to get at least Wnba. They got to have to up in Indiana. So this is an opportunity they have to demonstrate that they can be more consistent. And we've seen some great breakouts there. Elizabeth Williams has been a nice that roster, we should point out.
All right, Crystal, what do you think? Which team in your mind has to step up the most in the second half of the season, and why?
I'm gonna make it short and sweet. I think. I would love to see what happens between Seattle and Washington to see who's get the last playoff spot. I'm gonna say Seattle. I want to see how far they can step up.
All right, Eric. Crystal's gonna go with the Storm to step up. What do you think, though, and why?
In terms of teams that can need to step up, I would go with Washington because they put a big fat zero up during July. I don't think they won a single game in July. And when you put yourself in that kind of position, it's really hard to make the playoffs, especially with the new playoff format. And this is a team where they're not going to have any more excuses. They're going to have everyone healthy. They're going to have Latoya back after the Olympics. They got a veteran coach. It's a core that's been together for a little while now, so chemistry should be an issue. And as as brought up earlier, Albert goes forever. He's always saying Steve said treadmill mode. I think that's pretty funny. People say, well, they're always good enough just to make the playoffs, but then they lose and then they can't get a lotto pick. So I think what happens with the Mystics in these last 10 games is going to be crucial for the franchise.
All right, Eric, we'll stay with you, but you're going to go with Washington. I think, guys, I think if there's a team from each conference that needs to step up, I know they're totally irrelevant now, but I would probably go with what's we already brought, though. I think Phoenix out west needs to be the team that has to step up the most out west, and then out east, probably Chicago. Probably those are the two teams I'm going to look at to step up most, as we already brought up. I think Pat hit the nail on the head about the Mercury again with so much talent again, and they really have had problems. Steven even brought up too about the off-season problems for Brittany Griner, and again sort of carried over into the season so far. So Phoenix is my pick out west to step up. Chicago out east too, because with the talent on their roster, I know they've done some roster and position changing, but those two teams by far, in my mind, are probably the two teams I want to see step up. Eric, to begin our last question before we get to some more generic discussion about the entire season. Eric, in your mind, who are the players to watch this second half of the season in your mind?
Players to watch. Would it be a homer pick if I said Elena Deladon? Because, no, there's a legit reason. I think, when you guys were kind of dogging on Chicago and their personnel, I think the one thing that can't be denied is that Elena, as she goes, the team goes. And if she has another MVP-type second half of the season, they can make the playoffs. If she doesn't, they're not going to go very far. So I think when you consider players who are very important to their teams, I think she's up there. And as the reigning MVP, she still has some pull. So I think she's the number one player to watch. I'd also look out for Diana Taurasi, because when you talk about players with the killer instinct, not on defense, but on offense. When you talk about the players with the killer instinct on offense, she's the one who has to step up and lead Phoenix through this disappointing stretch on offense, not on defense. Okay, stop. But seriously, when you talk about a Hall of Fame, people say she's the greatest of all time. Okay, well, prove it. Now is more of a time than ever where she needs to step up. She's the best player on the team. She needs to assert herself and lead them out of disappointing stretches they've had.
So, Crystal, Eric picks EDD and DT for his players to watch the second half of the season. Crystal, who do you pick for your second half players to watch, and why?
Monique Curry? No, I'm just playing. The second half to watch. I'm going to pick Mariah Jefferson, and who's my second player to watch? I'll say Diana Taurasi as well. And here's why. Because Diana Taurasi, like I said, she had a very great Olympics. I want to see if she's going to bring what she brought to the Olympics to Phoenix Mercury, because they need it. They need something, and they're going to need a little bit of spice from her. And Mariah Jefferson, because she's just been an interesting rookie to watch. I would love to see how much she's learned over the break, how much she can bring over from the break to try to push her team. I mean, they're not going to the playoffs, to see how far they can go with the team. More like a learning goal for her. It would be interesting to see, if she made any improvements over the break. I mean, I'm not expecting a drastic improvement, but to see if she's made any kind of improvements. But Mariah Jefferson and Diana Taurasi would be my two players.
All right, Mike, so Crystal's going to go with Mo Jeff and DT. Who do you pick for your players to watch the second half of the season, and why?
Oh my goodness, that's a tough question, because there are so many storylines within those players. And we kind of teased about the links and how do the 4 Olympians, well, and 5 with Anna, how do they come back? I know Cheryl has been managing them meticulously this season, so I think that whole group of Olympians will be a group to watch. Can they gain their chemistry and can they continue to perform with the bench players who I would argue Minnesota's the closest team in the league, but will that be enough to carry them through? They did take a few days off. The 4 Olympians did not practice the last couple of days. The other 7 did. So we'll have to see, can they manage them with a dozen games of extra mileage, and then conversely, can LA resume what they're doing? And I really think, well, I want to see what NECA and Candace can do for the Sparks. Can NECA continue this toward shooting rate of hers, and will Candace Parker kind of, everyone's been saying that Olympic snub has given her some motivation. Well, now that the Olympics have passed and she's been out of the limelight for a month, well, I've got a feeling that her play will try to dictate some attention back to her direction. So I know that a lot of candidates for 2 completely different reasons. I would go with those folks.
All right, Pat, what do you think about who is your second half players to watch this upcoming game day tomorrow?
All right, so I'm actually going to talk about 5 total players, but 3 of them are going to be grouped together. One of the players that I'm anxious to see in the second half has already been covered, so I don't have to go any much further in depth. Diana Taurasi. But specifically because I read an article today where she mentioned that one of the things that she wants to do is bring back a lot of the things that Gino did with the team in Rio back to Phoenix. And that reads to me 2 ways. One, that things may be a little bit more dysfunctional in Phoenix than we think. And 2, that she's serious about finishing the season strong. So for those 2 reasons, I think that, that's going to be interesting to watch her play. I mean, she can still take over a game just about any night of the week. So watching her is going to be fun. The second player I'm going to talk about actually probably isn't going to play a minute this season, but it was mentioned a little bit earlier, Danielle Robinson. I'm going to be quite frank here. I don't see how she and Mariah Jefferson can play together. So somebody's going to have to be moved in that situation, if you ask me. San Antonio has a couple holes at the wing spot at the 3, and I love Jayna Pell coming out of college, but I mean, you need a 5 that's going to be a threat on the floor. So I think they have some holes that they can fill there, and Danielle Robinson has the talent to be able to garner some of that. So I think she's going to be the one that's going to end up being traded. But the 3 players that I'm going to group together actually were drafted together, and the WNBA decided to market them as the 3 to see. In my opinion, all 3 have been quite underwhelming this season. Brittany Griner looks like she doesn't know how to play a lick of defense. Elena Deladon has played well, but it kind of reminds me of when she was at Delaware, where she was the best player on the floor, but she really wasn't making her teammates better. She really wasn't taking that team to the next level. She's at a different spot in terms of making her teammates better. She sees the floor a little bit better, makes the passes that she needs to. But she's going to have to be on the floor. She's going to have to be productive. She's going to have to be a leader for that team at this point. There's nobody else who's going to do it at this point. Cappy's trying to find her game. The point guards are still a little bit young. The Souza's on her last legs. She's going to have to be the one that pushes them forward. And Skylar Diggins, I felt like it was kind of a diva approach, the way that they handled her returning this season. So it's time to put up, it's put up or shut up time. All this time that you took to, get yourself straight, and now you've had the Olympic break. Now it's time to come out guns blazing and lead your team to a playoff spot, because there's absolutely no reason for them to have crept into the playoffs last season with the format being different and to not make the playoffs this season. There's absolutely no reason for that. So for those reasons, I think that the 3 to see are probably going to be the main ones that I look to watch, because they're counted on highly for their teams. The WNBA marketed them as game changers, and they're not playing like it.
All right, Steven. So Pat's going with the 3 to see from the 2013 draft class in his mind, plus Diana Taurasi. Steven, which players do you think are you watching closely, though, as we begin the second half of the season in your mind, buddy?
Well, I mean, first of all, let me touch on what he said about San Antonio. He is correct. San Antonio has more than a few holes, actually. But I do agree that, you're not going to see Danielle Robinson, in my opinion at least, you're not going to see Danielle Robinson or Mariah Jefferson together next season. With Danielle Robinson coming off an injury, especially the way that she has the Achilles, you're not 100% sure what you're going to get from her. Will she be explosive like we know her to be? Personally, I don't think so. I do see her being traded for who and to where, I have no idea, but I do see her being traded. And he also touched on Jane Appel. I've been saying this on Twitter. If you guys follow me on Twitter, you know this. I've been saying it constantly that Jane Appel should not be starting. Kayla Alexander has proven time and time again that I see him shaking his head in the corner that Kayla Alexander has proven what she can and she should be starting. She's more aggressive. I like her, especially when Dan has her out there with De'Erica Hamby. I like them two together in the paint. Kayla has proven that she does deserve to start. I don't understand. I don't know if Dan Hughes just saw the roster and was like, hey, you know what? Let's just go with this for the whole season and see what happens. But unfortunately, K-Mag got hurt, and now he has to change that up. But I'm interested to see what happens there. But what players am I looking at? I am looking at Diana Taurasi, specifically for obviously her, how she's going to be impacting the scoring. And I did hear a little bit of the article that you guys have heard. She's going to bring a little bit of Gino's system to Phoenix, which again makes me wonder: is Diana happy with Sandy Brondello as the coach? Is there something deeper going on than just Brittany Griner in Phoenix? And the other one, the other player I'm going to be watching is Tamika Catchings, not because she's a bad player or nothing, because it's her final season, and I want to watch her closely. And she is coming to San Antonio one more time, so that's the day before my birthday, so I'm going to enjoy that one. And it's going to be sad to see Tamika go. I've watched her for many seasons, and it's going to be a good time to see her one more time.
Absolutely. All right, Mr. Rice, let's hear from you. Who do you have as your second-half players to watch in your mind?
I'm going to take a little different approach and go to the bottom of the standings. I am interested in the Kurt Miller project in Connecticut. They peddled Elizabeth Williams for the number 4 and spent it on Rachel Banham. And I think 3 or 4 years from now, that's going to look even more disastrous. I was not crazy about giving away Chelsea Gray and a lottery pick to the Sparks for the rights to Jones. The jury is out there. I'm not sure Kurt Miller, as much as I respect him, is a college coach. I'm not sure he's a professional coach. But I'm going to go with Courtney Williams. We mentioned earlier what little I saw of her at South Florida. The kid is just crazy athletic. I'm going to say it out loud in front of all you guys. Courtney Williams is the next Tweety Nolan.
I second that.
We'll revisit that in a couple years down the road. And Jonquel Jones, for a kid that played in a mid-major program, is very skilled kid for her size. It's a question of sorting out how do you best use her. Very much like Stu and Jor in San Antonio. So I'm looking forward from now to the end of the year. Connecticut's not looking like a playoff team. It would be almost pointless anyway. But I'm looking at Jonquel Jones and Courtney Williams and see what they do the rest of the way.
And in the chat box, folks, a couple comments from one of our good viewers from Irene St. Jude, who says, agree on Taurasi, Griner, and Skylar, but also hoping and waiting for Parker's 3-ball game to come back. She also hopes Lori Johnson goes on a tear after having that injury. Guys, before we do wrap up, we'll go on the perimeter one more time, starting off with Mr. Rice. Of course, Steve, I'm sure that you've been around women's basketball a lot longer than a lot of us in this hangout have been, of course, for a long time. Steve, what does it mean to you seeing the WNBA, still thriving again through so much adversity for the league from day one, to still see it here during its 20th season? I guess what does it mean to you, I guess, as both a writer and a fan of women's basketball, seeing this league still here after all these years and through everything it has to endure on a daily basis?
Thank you, David Stern. And hopefully, thank you, Adam Silver. So far, so good. I not to be Debbie Downer here, but I'm concerned about a couple ownership groups. I'm not even going to say them, but all things considered, a lot of people spend too much time worrying about why is this a niche sport, why is it a niche league, and so on. It is what it is. You're not going to change that with the best marketing in the world. One thing I'm really positive about is Nike next year. Not that Nike's going to fix anything, but is there a better marketing machine than Nike Incorporated? I don't know who that would be. So I think that will be as big a boost as anything else next year is the Nike partnership. Overall, I'm very optimistic. I hope this new playoff format works, and the idea was to get the cream of the crop in your championship series, and hopefully, have it on TV would be nice too. So, overall, I'm optimistic.
So, Stephen, Mr. Rice says he's optimistic, but again, of course, Stephen, again, like I said at the top of the show, again, you're working for a team that technically is celebrating 20 years, but of course they relocated after being under the Jazz umbrella back in the early 90s to San Antonio, and they become a staple underneath the umbrella of the Spurs, of course, a team that you and I both know very well, of course, the AHL's San Antonio Rampage, of course, who's also underneath the umbrella at AT&T Center, plus what the Spurs have done too, along with themselves, the Stars, the Rampage, plus the soccer club and playing as well. Stephen, I guess, what does it mean for you, I guess, being a part of the, a Project Spurs, but also, again, seeing this league and all these teams battling day in and day out for, publicity and of course, getting people to the games. What does it mean for you, I guess, to see this league here through 20 years of existence?
Well, first off, I'm excited not only to once this WNBA season wraps up, you and I are going to have some hockey to talk about. So I'm excited for that. San Diego and San Antonio should be a lot of fun. But, just to get to the question, I have this is my fourth season covering the Stars, and everyone has been great. And it's not because of the team's great or the team's horrible. I mean, record-wise, it doesn't matter. It's just the people and the environment that you go to. I mean, when I tell people, hey, I work with the WNBA, the response from guys usually is, oh man, it's boring, But that's real basketball. The real fundamentals of basketball is the skills. These are the best women in the world doing what they love to do, and I love it. I mean, there's not every single day. I mean, every single game I go to, every single game I cover, win or lose, it's just great to see these women go out there, compete 24/7, do what they love to do. And obviously, the Stars are not having a good season. I think we all know that. But I mean, that's beside the point. To see that they know that they're not going to go to the playoffs, they're not going to maybe make a great season, but they still go out there and they compete to the last buzzer. And that's the thing. That's what I talked about earlier, is that they're in games. They may not win them, but they are in games because they know that this is the best league in the world. These are the best players. And even though where are you going to see Brittany Griner or Diana Taurasi on the same team, or are you going to see Sue Bird and when she was here, Becky Hammond on the same court together? I mean, two greats like that going at each other. And I'll tell you one thing: I was not working with the Stars when Becky was here during the Stars playoff run in 2008 when they won the conference championship. But I'll tell you what, watching that team, that Stars team, was probably the best moment, I mean, for me as a WNBA fan, because, I mean, you got to see your hard-working, players, and they're fighting for every ball. And I mean, that's what you want to see. I mean, now if you switch to the NBA, now it's just Stephen Curry hitting threes every 5 minutes. I mean, you really don't want to see that. I mean, the WNBA, I feel, it has a step up on the NBA because they do showcase the skill of basketball.
Again, Pat, of course, you being a member of the X Factor, of course, I've been to a few games down there, and seeing that crowd of over 10,000 fill up TSRA, whatever they call it, Talking Stick Resort Arena, the Purple Palace, whatever it's called, and that is by far probably, a spectacle to see those when you can go to, either between Los Angeles getting 8 to 10,000 a game, Phoenix always packed at 10,000, of course, Target Center always packed too in St. Paul, Minneapolis. Pat, I guess, what does it mean for you, I guess, seeing the WNBA again thriving still 20 years after being founded, in 1996?
Well, I'm gonna be a little bit of a storyteller here. Women's basketball became relevant to me way back in grammar school. When I first settled in Mississippi and got into schooling here, within a few weeks of me being at the school that I was at, and I'll never forget her name, Alicia. She's Alicia Dito. She was a girls basketball coach at our school at the time. And I just kind of ended up in a kind of numbers crunch situation in terms of being on the boys team that seventh grade year when I was eligible. But what she did was she took me and she made me her go-to guy. And what my responsibility was to bring 4 additional guys into the gym to practice against her girls every day to get them prepared for the season. Now, I don't know if anybody remembers this name, but Lysandra Barrett was drafted out of LSU into the WNBA. I graduated high school with her, went to school with her from 6th grade on. She was one of the players that was on the team at that time, and that particular team, all 3 years that I was in grammar school, they didn't lose a single game. And I was responsible for prepping them before the game. And it was at that point that I got to see the level of skill and the talent and the drive that it takes for the women to play this game at a high level because they don't have the athletic ability that men have. And so this has been sort of a lifelong journey for me in terms of, wanting to help build the brand for women and to garner respect for them. And so to be able to be in an atmosphere and rooting for a team that I love with all my heart. Let's be honest about this. I've been a Phoenix fan since 2004 when they drafted D. I've watched this team go through some of its lowest times, and I've watched this team experience the highs of winning championships. So to be able to be in that atmosphere and see, 9,999, whatever the number may be, other people that have the same passion that I do and the same love that I do and appreciation for this beautiful game. It's something that I can't even really relate to anything else because, the one constant in my life has been basketball. This is a love that's much deeper than anything else I can speak on. So to be able to share that with people at this level, I don't think there's anything else that I cherish more in my life that can actually not be put to monetary value. So.
And Mike, I know that Steven and I were just talking about, of course, we're going to have a little fun rivalry when San Antonio plays San Diego in AHL hockey. We're coming for you, too, when San Diego plays Iowa this year, the Wilds affiliate over there in Des Moines this year for our 2 get-togethers in San Diego and in Des Moines this year. But again, Mike, I know we had you on our preview show for the first half and for the regular season earlier back in May. And again, I know that you had pretty much started covering the Lynx during their low point before they really ascended to the top of the WNBA throne recently. But again, Mike, what's it mean to you, I guess, to be able to cover the Lynx and write for XL Sports, but again, seeing the WNBA still thriving after, many, low points and contractions and expansions in its history?
It's been a whirlwind. I started my coverage in 2009, and I should add that the Lynx will be residing in the home of the Wild next year. The announcement of their relocation to XL Energy Center, I think, took place right before the Olympic break. So we're going to have to make a little room for some basketball in the middle of a hockey venue. So we'll have to see how that pans out. Looking forward to it. Closer commute for me. I live in St. Paul. But to answer your question, yeah, it's been a journey, thrilling, exciting even. The first couple of years, the one and only year with Jennifer Gillum, that's when I started covering the team. And then the first year, Shell Reeve, where the Lynx struggled really. They didn't have enough depth to hang on to leads at that point. And I remember folks looking at me like, why would you cover this team? Things like that. They kind of gave you some odd looks, and they start winning titles, and then that's fusion turned to envy. I've had people hit me up asking, how do I get credentials or tickets, things like that. So I guess I've become a bit of a celebrity in that regard, but I think the thing to remember, and I discussed this back in May, is that every league goes through these growing pains. So the NBA went through this, the NFL went through this. Remember, there was the NBA was fighting with the ABA for all those years, and there was NFL and AFL before they merged, and it takes a while. I mean, the NHL had 6 teams up until the 60s, if I can recall, so it takes a while sometimes for these leagues to grow. And I think folks can forget that, and when You've got social media. You have all these ways where you can publish your thoughts and opinions instantly. Sometimes means you don't do your homework as you should. And there have been some folks who compared the metrics between the WNBA and its brother league, and reached a conclusion that in some ways they've been able to expand or get along or establish themselves more effectively than the NBA did. And even years ago, before I started covering it, that's what I told folks. Just be patient. It's going to take a while for things to sort out. And the more people are aware of this, we talk about all the players who go in now, growing up with this league. Well, now it's ingrained, so a lot of women can consider it a career option. And I'm just glad I stuck with it, because right before I joined Excel, I was having trouble finding an outlet. A little bit of a personal story, and it was full court dissolved, and I'm thinking my career is going to stall out. So I got a little bit of help from some good sources, and that's what got me to Excel. And I'm glad I stuck with it, because I've been able to share some really powerful stories this season. And I think my own experience and covering the league for 8 years has just preached the notion of patience. I think that's why this league has been able to stick around. Yes, we all can get riled up when things go awry. The Black Lives Matter conversation, I don't think anybody was expecting it to dominate coverage as it did for the whole month of July almost. And just all these things, when folks are saying this league is going to go under, or if something goes wrong, you wonder, well, why aren't they doing more? Well, keep in mind, they're still growing. In many ways, the NBA is still a teenager. All of its brother leagues are the savvy veterans. They've been around. They have enough of a product that they can take a few hits. So yes, patience is really the biggest thing, and I think that's why they're thriving. Is you've got folks who are willing to take a financial hit, folks who are willing to embrace it for what it is. I know women's coverage has been brought up again with the Olympics, and you get enough of those people out there, others will start showing that same respect. Long-winded answer, but I think the core value to its success in the first 20 years has been patience. And I foresee patience being a key ingredient in the next 20 years.
Todd Minch chimes in. He agrees with the comment that Steve Rice brought up about Nike and their new deal coming in place. He also says the level of play has never been better, but off-the-court marketing and so much more can and needs to be done if this league can take off for more. Again, Crystal, I know that, of course, you being our resident athlete in this hangout, of course, and we know, or you've at least shared stories about your experience playing basketball and, somewhat hearing what all the other female athletes have to hear on a daily basis. But again, Crystal, I guess what does it mean to you, to see, a women's professional sports league still being here 20 years later after it was founded back in '96?
Well, I have two things. One, I have to go back to whoever that was that said something about Candace Parker shooting threes. To be honest, she never really was a great three-point shooter. She kind of just got the green light because it's Candace Parker. I really don't like her when she's shooting those. We have three-point shooters on the team and the roster for that. So I don't really know about that one. But to answer your question, Catelyn, I'll get back to it. To answer your question, it's good to see the WNBA still being around for 20 years. I mean, who would have thought that a women's pro league, especially a women's basketball league, would last as long as it has? I mean, you see the great athletes it's produced. You see the great memories, the great buzzer beaters. I mean, last year that great shot Maya Moore put on Indiana to, win Game 3, I believe it was.
I was there.
But,
Look at that.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. I mean, this is an incredible league. You wish that the first women's soccer league they had would have stayed around for 20 years. But I mean, for all the soccer fans up there is another one. But will it amount to what the WNBA is? Hopefully, we never know. But it's just amazing to have a professional women's pro league to last as long as it has, and hopefully it lasts 20 more years. And I'm proud to say that I've been a fan of WNBA for as long as I can remember, and I hope they keep it up.
By the way, Crystal, one of our co-hosts, Reagan Patrick, just sent you a comment in the chat box. She said, Crystal, get the 1v1 with a devil face emoji. What's that all about?
Repeat it. Who said it?
Reagan Patrick said, Crystal, get the 1v1 with a devil face emoji.
All right, Reagan. You don't want these problems, Reagan. You don't want
Taking the
these problems,
challenge
man.
online,
I'm gonna
man.
be yeah. I'll give it to him. They gonna call me Elena Beard, Christy Tolliver, Brittany Grant, down all of them. We gonna get it. We can get that going, Reagan.
Real quick here before we get to you, Pat, you got something else to bring up. What is it and why?
Well, I just wanted to add
Are
one
you
thing that I hope might help in terms of those out there. Since we're talking about the WNBA in the manner that we have, you know, I want the world to know that the WNBA gets a lot of flack and a lot of jokes. They're the butt of a lot of jokes I see all the time online, but I feel like a special privileged member of a really, really special group being a WNBA fan. And there's not a lot of times that I haven't experienced talking basketball where even if I don't agree with someone, I understand where they're coming from. And on this call, that's what has happened. And I think that speaks to this special membership club that I'm talking about, because in order to appreciate the WNBA, even if you don't have a background in basketball, you have to be able to appreciate and understand basketball from a fundamental level.
Yep.
You have to not be looking for the dunks and the high flying steals and all the blocks and all of those things. You have to be able to appreciate basketball in its purest form. And so, like I said, I feel like a member of a specially privileged group, because when I talk to WNBA fans, when I talk to WNBA, people that are trying to push the league forward, they have that knowledge and that understanding and that ability. So, in terms of, fighting off the haters that are there, I don't even think that that's something that should even be addressed, because like I said, for me, all that does is it lets me know that I don't need to talk basketball with you. And it's usually something that works out for me in terms of making the right decision. So
All I got to say is, like Eric would say, praise hands emoji for Pat right there, because I would agree 100%. We'll get to my take later. A couple comments directed at Crystal Thompson. She's not even in her box right now. Eric said that Crystal doesn't want these problems. Shorty Mamba 24, Tanisha Stewart said Crystal will be getting her ankles broken, and Reagan says you better tell her. Eric, I guess, and I know that I'm a broken record, which is why all of you guys, are not everyone in this panel, but everybody that's a part of our regular broadcast team is taking over from me in a couple weeks, is because, Eric, I ask the same questions over and over again pretty much. But again, Eric, I know that, hey, it's a different dynamic, of course, as a male being a female sports fan. Of course, we're pretty much seduced to the same type of ill treatment that female athletes are given, because we appreciate the sports that they play. But I guess, Eric, again, what does it mean for you to see the WNBA still thriving at 20 years old?
It's really cool. Just to piggyback off what Pat said, as usual, I have what I want to say stolen by somebody else, but we're okay. Basically, just what I wanted to say was, I just agree with everything Pat just said. When I started, obviously I got into basketball with the NBA, as most people do, and it was cool. It was just something I enjoyed as like a pastime, just watching basketball. But I think my love for the game really started to blossom when I started watching the WNBA, because it really taught me more about the game. As Pat said, it wasn't just about the dunks; it was about the skill level, and actually mostly it was the coaching. As soon as when I started getting involved with like analyzing coaching tactics and what have you, like on offense and defense, like sets and stuff like that, that's when I really started to get a better appreciation of the game, because there's more strategy, there's more there's more skill, and there's more thought given into the game than it comes across as, basically. And when you look at the WNBA, when there's more emphasis on teamwork and fundamentals, that becomes much more apparent. But it's only if you're looking for it. So if it's these people who just watch the occasional game on NBA TV, being like, "Yo, where are the dunks, man? This sucks. This is too slow. It's boring," you're not going to get that. And I think when Steve Rice brought this up very early in the program, it's a niche league, maybe, but I think it's a niche league for the right reasons, because the niche is people who can actually appreciate basketball no matter who's playing it. All right, and that's something I don't play. I suck at basketball. I'm such a bad athlete. Okay, I'm just gonna say that now. So I have no ego. All right, people who know me will say that. It's like I am the most self-degrading person ever. So I don't have a problem saying, "Wow, these ladies are really good at what they do. I enjoy watching them play." Which it seems kind of silly, because why should that be such a big deal to say anyway? Like, they're professional athletes. Who cares if they're women, right? It's in fact, I think it's even cooler that they play year round in order to make a living, but they still do it because they love the game, And I just think that's so cool. I have so much respect for them, the work they do in the community, the role models that they are for young women and young children, and the LGBT community, everything. You know, they're a huge influence in those groups, and it makes you proud to be a fan. It really does. So if only for that reason, I hope the league sticks around for another 20 years. It's worth it.
You know, guys, I think about my position as a sports fan, but more so I view it, though, kind of like Pat, how he observes sports, or from basketball's sake, from a coaching point. Of course, I'm looking at it more as a media broadcaster, whatnot. You know, and living in San Diego, guys, you know, you kind of have to, you know, take things with a grain of salt. Of course, you guys want to know what's going on with our football team, and our baseball team is trash. And they're really, for me to appreciate basketball, for me when I was younger, I would have to, you know, either go 2 hours up north to LA or 5 hours east to Phoenix to get the closest WNBA teams to my city. And, you know, for me, though, it actually started, though, when I went to a game at UConn during Tarasi's senior year, because my uncle and aunt who lived back in Hartford have been ticket holders for a long time. And one game, pretty much like everyone else, one game gets you into the sport because of how you see them carry themselves on and off the court. You know, I can pretty much say that the Suns and Mercury organization have become kind of a adopted, you know, adopted team and city, because I, for one, appreciate the way that they really treat their fans in a very good way in regards to so many things that you can do from going to those games. But, you know, the Lakers, of course, was one thing, too, when they won their 3 titles, only because that was where, you know, that's my closest NBA city and WNBA city. But then, you know, it was DT, and then then I had a dry spell, and then, of course, Candace Parker. You guys probably know what's gone on from there since as early as 2014. But, you know, seeing a league, though, that, you know, has a never say die attitude, you know, and the players aren't afraid to, you know, to put people in their place on social media one day, but then they can go out of their way to, you know, let a college kid interview them for an assignment. They can sign all the autographs you want. You know, that's what makes me a fan, though, is the fan and player relationships that we get to see every day, whether it's, you know, pictures that we get to take with these athletes, or the autographs that they sign, or what have you, guys. And I'm with Eric, though. I'm in for 20 more years. But again, especially, though, folks, grateful and thankful and honored to have our full panel tonight, though, of Eric, Crystal, Mike, Pat, Steven, and Steve all join us on the program tonight, this evening. With that, folks, we will call it a night so we can get our friends out for the evening. Of course, time change does not help. But again, Steve, Steven, Pat, and Mike, thank you guys very much for taking time out of your evening to join us here tonight, and we hope to have you guys on again sometime soon.
Thanks, Colin.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
And with that, folks, up until tomorrow night when we get back to work with the 2016 WNBA season. Real quick, folks, your 4-game schedule for tomorrow: the Lynx and Sun, Liberty and Stars, Dream and Sky, Wings at Mercury, and the Sparks will be at Seattle. We'll have more about that with all the post-game coverage back here on the network tomorrow night, folks. With that, though, up until tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, on a very great night here on the program again, another mega show in the books. For Eric Nimchok in Elmerville, Illinois, Crystal Thomas up in Los Angeles, Mike Peden joining us from the land of 10,000 lakes, Pat Friday, Stephen Anderson, and Steve Rice, folks. For Cal McClurg in San Diego, signing off, folks. Until tomorrow night, have a safe night. Drive home safely. Thanks for standing by, folks, and joining us, and for the remainder of the night, back here tomorrow night at 10 o'clock p.m., late night edition for the first game back in the 2016 WNBA second half of the season, folks. Take care, and all a good night. Bye-bye.